Didn't give me an option of where to record it to. That's cloud recording on Mac. Okay, very, very good. It is 7:05, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. I am Deb Travis. I am the chair of the Community Board 8 Parks and Recreation Committee. Just let one more person in. Lost my notes. I have a few housekeeping items to help us guide us during our meeting tonight. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will follow the agenda that was previously distributed. If we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you'd like to speak, that you raise your hand and I will call on you. Our goal is to have a good, robust discussion of our agenda items. However, if we have a lot of people who would like to speak on any given topic, you may only get to speak once, so make sure to make it count.
You're showing your video right now. You can turn off your video if you want.
I don't want my video.
Okay.
Mute yourself.
I'm gonna mute. So if you're speaking, we ask that you keep yourself muted. I'm sorry, if you're not speaking, we ask that you keep yourself muted to prevent background noise from interrupting other people. If you're on Zoom, to raise your hand, you will select reactions at the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone, it's *6 to mute and unmute. It's a toggle, and *9 to raise your hand. Just let Laura in. There you go. All right. So next, I'll call the roll. So I am here. Leona, I see you're here. David Gelman here. Bob Bender here. Rob Jaklowski, Ramdot is not here, so he's going to be a little bit late, but he'll be joining us soon. And Bob Panuzzi.
Yeah.
So, and then also I see Laura Spalter has signed on. Anybody else from Community Board 8? Okay. And then I see Barbara Stronser from Community Board 7. Is there anybody else from other community boards? Okay. Welcome, Barbara. It's great to have you on the call. As far as thank you. Oh, thank you. As far as presenters go, who do we have from Parks today?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Greenfeld, Deputy Commissioner, Environment and Planning, mostly just listening to my team. Nice to see everybody.
Jennifer Greenfeld, okay, great.
Matt or Christy, you want to go ahead? Or Mike and Annie, those are all folks from Parks.
Sure. I'll jump in. My name is Matt Donham. Director of Ecological Design, a landscape architect in the Environment and Planning Division of Parks. Christy?
Hi, thanks. Sorry everyone about earlier. I think you probably heard my daughter coming to get one last word in before I started working. Anyway, hi, I'm Christy King. I'm the Director of Natural Areas Management at the Natural Resources Group in Parks. There's Annie and then also Becca.
Hi, I'm Annie Weinmeier. I'm a landscape architect on the Natural Resources team in Environment and Planning Division.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Swadek. I'm the Director of Wetlands, also from Natural Resources.
Wonderful. And then I also saw Dan Paternak has entered. He's also on Community Board 8. Welcome, Dan. You're our second person in a car. We'll see who gets home. We'll see who gets home first. So anybody else from the Parks Department? Stephanie, I see you. Stephanie Ehrlich from Van Cortlandt Park.
Hiya.
Is there anybody else tonight from Van Cortlandt Park Alliance or Van Cortlandt Park?
No.
Okay. Any elected officials? Okay. And then we have Stacy from Riverdale Press. All right. So the next up, I would like to approve the minutes of January 25th and February 22nd committee meetings, which were distributed to the committee members ahead of time. We are approving the January minutes at this meeting because we didn't have quorum at the last meeting to do it. So does anybody on the committee have any changes that they would like to see to either of those sets of minutes? Seeing no changes, is there anybody opposed to approving the minutes? Okay, so moved. The minutes of January and February, January 25th and February 22nd committee meeting minutes are approved. And then the chair's report. First off, I wanted to just let everyone know that the May Parks Committee meeting is going to be a joint meeting with the Environment and Sanitation Committee, and we're going to have it on the Parks Committee date. The purpose of the joint meeting will be to discuss the Tibbetts Greenway that runs along the Putnam, the former CSX rail line. I'm just going to mute. There we go. Always so busy at the beginning of a meeting. It'll be just to discuss kind of updates of the work that's being done on the Tibbetts Greenway. The meeting's going to be Wednesday, May 24th, and we're going to be starting at 6 p.m. Just because of probably the length of the meeting, since it's going to be 2 meetings. So just everyone to try to make an effort to attend this important meeting, and I really encourage the public to come and see what the plan is for the new Greenway. Also, Riverdale Park tree planting is scheduled for Sunday, April 2nd. That's this Sunday. The Parks Department is going to be hosting a tree planting in Riverdale Park from 9 a.m. to noon. They will be meeting at Independence Avenue and West 232nd Street. For more information, just go to nyc.gov/parks/stewardship and you can sign up there. Wanted to let everyone know the gas station concession in Van Cortlandt Park has a request for proposals out. The Parks Department is seeking a concessionaire for a 15-year term to operate those 2 gas stations on the Major Deegan that are located in Van Cortlandt Park, along with 4 other gas stations as one unit. The proposals are due Tuesday, April 11th. They're seeking optional food service as well, and they're looking for proposals who have a strong background in food service and are planning to require substantial capital improvements including the installation of electrical charging stations at these gas stations, which I think is pretty exciting. Here we just got one more personal item.
Deb, did you say May 24th for that special meeting?
Yes, Wednesday, May 24th.
Thank you.
Yep. Next, I received news today that the Parks Department has discontinued the use of the term comfort station to refer to restrooms or public restrooms. We will, the term comfort station was reminding a lot of folks of the World War II term comfort women, which was when women were, specifically Korean women, were abused and sex trafficked, which is just a very sad occurrence during that time. And so going forward, the Parks is going to use the term public restroom, which I think probably is going to make everybody's lives a little bit easier anyway, because often people don't know what a comfort station even is. So the comforts, will have to make some adjustments in our, like I said, we don't have a comfort station anymore because we got that approved, but going forward, all of the comfort stations will now be referred to as public restrooms. And speaking of the four public restroom construction is scheduled to begin on April 17th. I know Mike is here. I don't know if anybody has any additional information they'd like to update us on regarding the four public restroom.
It's still scheduled to start on that date.
Okay, nothing new. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mike. So next, I would like to turn it over to New York City Parks to provide an update on the pedestrian bridge in Van Cortlandt Park. So let me allow you to share. So you should be able to share screen now. Matt, are you able to? Or Annie?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if you can give me access.
You should be able to.
There we go. Are you guys seeing that now?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Donham, as I said, and pleased to be with you to provide an update on status of the pedestrian bridge and alternates for crossing the Major Deegan. I'm going to start with a presentation that we have shared with Community Board 12 and then updated in the weeks following in response to some feedback we got in that presentation. So I'm going to give the same presentation and then hand off to Annie for the update so you can kind of understand what we were doing and now what we're thinking about. To start, if you'll move to the next slide, Annie. So some or all of you may recall the status of the plan to build over the Major Deegan back in November 19, when 2019, when it went on hold, and it was essentially a steel truss bridge that needs to be 17 feet off the ground to get over the Major Deegan, and then ramps to get up to that elevation, crossing from Allen Chandler Recreation Area over to the North Woods, just by those gas stations you were just referring to, Deb. So if you go to the next slide. And here's that same view in plan. And a couple of things happened over the development. This project's been going on for many years, and there was a feasibility study with 4 options, and then funding to build, to design a final option. And through that process, there was a lot of below grade infrastructure found, lots of conflicts, very difficult to find a location, and a lot of effort to minimize impacts on the woods, the woodland on either side. Nonetheless, in order to reach the 17-foot height, there were pretty significant disruption to substantial trees and ecology that we cherish for it's one of the healthiest forests in the park system. And will you go to the next slide? And so the bridge was the budget increased over its development, and then it went on hold with the pandemic. And when we came out, it's sort of 40% design, and a recent cost estimate revealed that it's very much under. It's over the budget we have available by about $15 million, and a kind of combination of that reality and our concerns with the forest led the Natural Resources Group to start exploring alternatives that would rely on the existing infrastructure of the Jerome Avenue Bridge and look at how we could make improvements there to get people across the Major Deegan in relatively close proximity, but using existing infrastructure. And so we explored this route in orange. So the red is the proposed bridge, and then the orange line you're seeing in the image on the right is this alternative path over the Jerome Avenue Bridge and into the woods, into the Croton Woods. So and so we've been exploring how to do that with minimal disruption to the forest and upgrades to the existing infrastructure with, and this is a much lower cost solution. Now, when we presented this, if you go to the next slide. Here are existing conditions of the intersection as you're kind of approaching the Jerome Avenue Bridge and then across the bridge to the other side. You can see it's the intersection and the crossing both need a lot of work to improve pedestrian safety. And the idea in that map all the way over to the right is that we could, because there's quite a bit of space, park-owned space along the approach to the bridge, we could do a lot to connect the woods right up to the Jerome Avenue Bridge and give a sense of the park continuing and connecting from one side to the other. And so in that image, kind of top middle, labeled 3, that's where you see the space we have to work with to improve the conditions. And one of the things we noted in doing this is we kind of revisited the idea that we were planning to build new infrastructure, but there was no plan to address the condition of the existing infrastructure. And the more we talked about it, the more it felt like, you know, first priority should be to address the existing infrastructure, bring it up to a safe and appealing condition. Can you go to the next? So here's a view of what it looks like today in the top left, and then what we imagine, much denser planting and perhaps timber rail carrying you, that, you know, giving you the sense of park reaching across to the bridge. So in the next image, since making this presentation to CB12, I think a critical thing we learned is that while we understood that there was a desire to reconnect the Croton Aqueduct Trail that had been divided by the highway, we didn't understand how much desire there was to go south on the trail and sort of into the interchange to the south. And so we had oriented that in the image on the left, we were orienting for people going north, hiking in Croton Woods. And what we heard is that there was a lot of demand to go south. And so in the middle, we're looking at a kind of switchback that allows us to create an accessible connection, gentle slopes down what is a fairly steep slope. And in the image on the right in green, we're looking at, there's a staircase that we would turn into a ramp in just over the Jerome Avenue Bridge, and so people could head directly south. And so those are two alternatives that we've started to explore, and we've also been looking at the context of, you know, where are people coming from and going to, and so I'm going to hand off to Annie to share that analysis. It's a little bit complicated to think about all the different ways you can move through the park and how this infrastructural upgrade, you know, will be useful to people. So, Annie.
Great. So, since we last presented the alternative ideas, we heard feedback from the community on, as Matt said, on the direction that people wanted to go when traveling within the park. And we also heard feedback on the distances they wanted to travel and interest in knowing how far each of these routes would be. So we took a look at distances and routes from Woodlawn Heights and distances and routes from the Norwood neighborhood. So I'll start with Woodlawn Heights. In red is the path from Woodlawn Heights as it would have been on the, as it would be on the proposed pedestrian bridge. And that comes out to about 2 miles from Woodlawn Heights to, we chose the parade ground as a kind of centrally located amenity on the west and southwest side of the park. So that'd be about 2 miles along the red route. In the black route, which is showing our at-grade enhanced accessible trail through the woods, that comes in about the same at about 1.9 miles. The shown in green is an option to possibly adapt the stairs that are at just the north side of the Jerome Avenue Bridge, to adapt those into an elevated accessible ramp. And that again would be about the same distance at about 1.8 miles. So takeaway is that it's about the same. So 2 miles would take about 50 minutes to walk. On this next slide, we looked at distances and routes from the Norwood neighborhood. So again, same color coding. The red shows the path from Norwood, or a path from Norwood going across the pedestrian bridge again to the parade ground. And that is about 2.8 miles. The black route showing the enhanced at-grade route through the woods is about 2.7. The elevated accessible ramp route, which would be reconfiguring the stairs at the north, on the north side of the Jerome Avenue Bridge, about 2.6 miles. So all those three again are about the same. And the green route in this diagram is shown going south, but it's the same distance if it were to go north, as there are those two crossing points by the golf courses. So in addition, on this map, we're showing an existing on-street route going from Norwood down along the bottom side of the park and then cutting up. And that's much shorter at 1.6 miles. So for context, 2.8 miles would take at least an hour probably. And 1.6 might take around 40 minutes. So the big takeaway from us was that the bridge or other options are roughly equidistant and similar in time. And so doing those diagrams really made it clear to us that whatever route pedestrians take, whether they're going to go over the pedestrian bridge or other paths, they still have to cross these major intersections to get into the park, crossing highway on and off ramps to get in. So we think that these, regardless of what option happens, traffic calming measures and improvements to those intersections would really be a benefit to all park users. And then in addition, once they get into the park, people still have to cross major sort of tunnels and bridges, which also are degraded infrastructure that could use improvements. So we think that these all could benefit some attention and extra consideration. So I'll leave you with this image, which is a conceptual rendering of a route, an accessible route through the woods, showing that the trail material would be accessible per National Trails Systems standards, and then in spots where there are grade changes, dips, or gullies, we could bridge those with some sorts of boardwalks or bridges in order to minimize the impact to surrounding trees. So I will stop sharing my screen so we can start the discussion.
Right, well, thank you for the presentation. I guess my first question is on the accessible route through the woods that you were just describing. Would it be boardwalk only in the places where there are gullies and kind of dips and places where maybe probably there's erosion of water, or are you imagining some sort of surface of a boardwalk type thing throughout the whole path?
I can take that. I mean, it's really a question of priorities. You know, it's substantially more expensive to build elevated walkway than excuse me, pavement on grade. And I think all of these alternatives kind of raise a question of we can expect that they will be significantly less expensive than you know, the current funding that we have in place. And so you know, we're in the, I suppose if we were to hear from the community that being on an elevated boardwalk all the way through the woods was a priority, we could explore that. We typically are operating in a world where we're trying to minimize, you know, that kind of expense, and so we would be on grade everywhere except where we couldn't be.
One of the other things that comes up a lot for our committee is kind of bikes and ATVs, e-bikes, motorized vehicles, and pedestrians. And one of the things that this is a little bit unclear to me is when you're imagining these paths or even these travel distances, you're describing them as being on foot. Is your intention that all of these paths would only be for pedestrians and that there would be no bike paths or transportation whatsoever and happening on any of these paths? I feel like sometimes there's like a little bit of the community. Often I hear that some members of the community wanting to just simply travel, like to be able to get from Woodlawn to the parade grounds, and then they're not looking for a 2-mile hike. They're looking just simply to get there to see a concert or to go to an event or to play sports. And that lots of other people we hear all the time, you know, they want to have the peace and quiet of a trail. And so and in Van Cortlandt Park in particular, there seems to be often this conflict between pedestrians and folks on bikes. And so how are you thinking about trails and like trail users and keeping them separate, or at least, you know, working well together?
I think I ought to defer to Stephanie a bit on the sort of programming. We're kind of a little too early in design to you know, in this alternative exploration to have kind of defined user groups, but we did hear in the last meeting from some folks looking for bike connection.
Yeah.
Most of this area in the Croton Woods is you know, unpaved. There isn't a continuous paved connection all the way through the woods. So Stephanie, is there more you want to add?
Well, I mean, I can just jump in too before Stephanie jumps in. Is it like the pathway that comes up from Gun Hill Road on the east side of, or on the west side of the Mosholu extension, for example, is a bike path. Bikes use it. It has bike signage, and it's part of the East Coast Greenway and connects over at the Golf House. But it's also, you could just as easily, and there's no signs telling you not to, go up the overpass and continue north along the Deegan. And so it's I do think it would be worthwhile for Van Cortlandt Park or for parks in general to actually make some decisions about some of these paths, especially when you're close to a highway, to keep, you know, so that people can use the park and get through the park and get to where they need in the places where it's not so pleasant to walk anyway, perhaps like right along the highway, so that the more the solitary places, the beautiful places that are quiet, can be, you know, actually preserved for walking, and or the places that are more forever wild forests, where you know, where you really want more contemplative stuff. The Northwest Forest comes to mind, where there's a lot of grade changes, there's a lot of fragile ecosystems. You want to kind of protect that stuff. So I just offer that up, but I do have some hands up too. Stephanie, do you want to talk about how Van Cortlandt Park is thinking about pedestrians versus bikes, or should I just move on for the moment?
I think we should move on. I think you know how I feel.
Okay. David Gelman.
Yes, thank you. Two things here. One, in terms of paving, not paving, whatever, the core area that we're talking about for crossing, basically Jerome Avenue and 233, and then the sidewalk that goes along the ramp, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the upper end of the Chandler, I think they are all paved. And my inclination is to keep the paved and to keep the unpaved. But I think it would be useful for Parks to come back to us and let us know what's there and what they recommend. But in that vein, I would say that that intersection of Jerome and 233, at least in terms of what was shown on the slides, it was focused on Chandler to the pathway along the Jerome ramp. I think it's a horrible intersection, and I think there needs to be a very, very careful study of that crossing, but also the other three crossings: crossing 233, crossing Jerome on the north side, crossing Jerome on the south side. And frankly, given that we were talking about a $20 or $30 million project, I think this is going to come in far less than that. My guess is $2 to $5 million. So the other part of my comment is that I'd shared with committee members some pictures of two different possibilities. I don't know whether you've explored them or not. The first one is rather fanciful. It's basically the old abandoned Croton Aqueduct that goes underneath right around that same spot. I think it would be really cool. I think it would show great respect to design and history. It may not be practical, but I think that Parks should look at it. The other one is if you were to go back to slide number 8 or 9, you would see that in the northeast corner, the John Muir Trail is a red line that goes underneath the Deegan, and this is that underpass. I've changed my my background. This is a picture of that underpass. It's ugly, but it's actually quite functional. At the very least, I believe that this project should, I think it should be seriously considered as a crossing point, but at the very least, it should be cleaned up. And with what was a $20 million budget, you're talking about probably 6 figures to make this very, very nice. But I think that along with a Parks evaluation of the pathways and the 4 crossings at Jerome and 233 should definitely be part of your planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can you show us again what the route is from Woodlawn to the parade grounds? Does that use any part of that trail?
No, it doesn't. But can you see where I'm talking about, the upper quadrant?
Oh, I see that. I am actually looking at the path to the Woodlawn from Woodlawn Heights.
Right. So where the cursor is right now, that's
the overpass
showing in my background.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with that area. And honestly, I will say, I don't know if there's anybody from the Women of Woodlawn on the call or from Woodlawn themselves, but that I think of people from Woodlawn as accessing the park further north. Is just a misunderstanding, or is that true? Is there anybody from Woodlawn that can speak to that? Maybe not.
There's quite a few people from Woodlawn, actually. Kim has a hand up.
Who has their hand up?
Kim.
I don't, am I just not seeing it? I see Bob's hand, I see your hand, and I see Leona's hand.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see any others.
I don't see any others.
Oh, it's the react. She's using the reaction button. That's why.
Ooh. Oh, Kim, hey, yeah, Kimmy, would you like to speak?
Yes, so I have a number of things to say. First, in mapping these routes, you know, yes, I think there's a few things that are missing here. One, when we're talking about Woodlawn specifically, what's being mapped is really outside the neighborhood. You're not mapping within the neighborhood whatsoever. You're mapping from a point that is completely not accounting for people that live in the neighborhood. You're mapping from, you know, along 233rd Street, and most people don't live on 233rd Street. So to use data points that aren't really relevant in the neighborhood is somewhat irrelevant. And another point is, somewhere along the way, the point of this project has lost sight. You can go back 20 years where the advocacy for this project was about equity. And part of equity was about getting from point A to point B in a faster way. We have less resources on our side of the park. There are more resources on the other side of the park. There's more programs on the other side of the park. In order for us to get to the 9 programs that are scheduled on your side of the park during the month of April, it would be very handy to have a faster route to walk over there when there's 0 programs scheduled on our side of the park right now. It really, there's something that's been lost in the shuffle in the recent years. I don't know if it's because of people changing hands, but I know there's been a lot of advocacy for the last 20 years that has really been focused on equity, and really equity is about getting from point A to point B faster, and that includes Norwood and Woodlawn. So I just want to put that out there. We already have a way to get from Woodlawn into your section of the park through the John Muir Trail, and that is the tunnel that David has up on his screen that is in very poor condition. It really would have been helpful to know what the mapping route is from a footage perspective or mileage perspective, how much time we're saving with these alternate routes when we're walking from Woodlawn through that John Muir Trail and getting to the Croton Trail versus these alternate routes, because that's really at the heart of what we as Woodlawn residents are looking for. We're looking to get over to your community faster because we have a lot of sports that our kids play over there. We have activities that we're looking for over there. And there are businesses that we're looking to support over there. So, and to be honest, you know, on our side of the park, we'll have the Mashpelot Golf Course that's open, the new driving range that's opening soon. So we'll be looking to welcome people from your community over to our side to use what little amenities we have on our side, you know, soon as well. So it really, to have equity, we need to be looking at solutions that are equitable.
Thank you, Kim, for saying all that and for coming on the call tonight. I don't think of it necessarily as our community or your community. I think of all of us really around the park as one community, and there's so much to do on both sides. I mean, do you feel as though walking is the primary metric that we should be measuring when we're talking about quickly getting from one side to the other? Is that because some of these trails too are much more like the John Muir Trail is great for walking. It's not so great for other things. It's because it's a little rambly.
Well, so there's a lot of us that do walk because either, you know, parking is very difficult everywhere in the Bronx.
Yes.
And it's just not convenient to park on either side. And walking just seems easier. and or people don't drive, or biking is, might not be preferable for, parks. Meaning that's not how Parks prefers people to use the park, but it is how people prefer to use the park.
Well, I'll say for
And I
myself,
think
like, yeah, I live in
we
Vancouver
do need
Village.
to
and I
account
have
for our
ready access.
bicyclists.
Yeah,
We really do. We do have a lot of people that use bikes, whether or not that's how Parks prefers the park to be used or not. We do need to account for them.
okay, thank you. Do you have any, Matt, do you want to respond at all?
Actually, I have a question if you don't mind, Matt. Kim, thank you
Yeah,
so much for
yes,
your
please.
feedback. And thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that people from Woodlawn tend to enter the park further north. Just so I understand, are you saying that people generally enter, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
So people enter on this red John Muir Trail, and then
That is how we currently enter, but if there is a faster route that is more south along 233rd, that's what people would be using instead.
I would say too that it's very dangerous at 233rd to come across from Woodlawn to the park, just on the street, the street level, if you have a bike or anything like that.
And I would say another alternate would be to cut through Indian Fields and avoid 233rd altogether. There's a beautiful path through Indian Fields.
where then you would then cut over the Jerome,
Yes.
Jerome Avenue Bridge to enter the park as well.
Yes.
Do you feel like improvements could be made along the basically the on-ramp there that's to the left of the tennis courts? Is that kind of the path that you're coming through?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty narrow.
Yeah, and we also have, I'm sure you're all familiar with Kira Gannon as your, former manager of CBEG, but she's also the president of Woodlawn Taxpayers, and she also has her hand up, and I'm sure she has a lot to add to this discussion as a lifelong Woodlawn resident.
Thank you. Kira, would you like to say something? And then I'll go to the committee members and then we can come back.
Sure. Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. And thanks for having this discussion. I am the president of the Woodlawn Taxpayer Association, and we as a board met last night to go over this proposal. And I just want to highlight what Kim's talking about is just access to the west side of the park, but also in a safe manner. Most people can't walk these paths on their own. Can't ride my bike down the path alone with all the homeless people living in the park. And it's just too unsafe going through the tunnel by yourself. I think a safe access over to the other side of the park would be great. But right now at Jerome, not only is it really scary to cross, there's major water main projects going on, which will obviously be done when this is taking place. But we have major issue right now with over 200 cars every weekend night blocking traffic, partying, riding ATVs, scooters. And I fear that creating an easy path for more ATVs and electric bikes to come over to that area is just going to be more of a nightmare. So I just want to make sure when Parks and the committee is discussing this, that there is a discussion on ATVs, on how wide this pedestrian bridge will be, and just safety. So thank you.
Thank you, Kira. And now Bob Bender, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah, let's leave that slide up that's up right now, because the tunnel is really not a practical option. I mean, first of all, it's there right now and anybody can use it. And based on my experience, and I've run the John Muir Trail many times, not many people are using it. It is unsafe. I mean, I certainly would not recommend that any single woman, or for that matter, two women, go through that tunnel. And if you look at the John Muir Trail from the Woodlawn side to where the tunnel is, you can see that that tunnel is actually more accessible to people in Yonkers than it is to people over in Woodlawn. It's not a viable option. It's way too far to the north. So we do need the new trail. I mean, let's put the tunnel aside. It's not an alternative to what we're talking about here. One thing that perplexes me is I keep hearing about accessibility, and I know back when we did this years ago, when we were talking about the original version of the pedestrian trail, that's why we had those gigantic ramps, because of the need to make the whole thing accessible, despite the fact that the trails it's connecting to are not accessible. They're not ADA accessible. They're not bike routes. They're not meant for bicycles or any other vehicles. I'm aware of that staircase, for instance, that's just to the north of the 233rd Street off ramp, and I don't know how you would, excuse me, given the grade there between Jerome Avenue and the Croton Trail, that's a very significant difference in grade. And I don't quite know how you would turn that staircase into something that would be accessible. Before I heard somebody refer to switchbacks to get up there, and that leads me back to thinking of the ramps we had before. But the question of accessibility is it's a baffling question. I understand the law, and I know that accessibility is required, even though, as I say, the trails we're connecting here are not really ADA accessible. But if that's what has to be done, that's what has to be done. But I think it's a bigger undertaking than simply making a connection. And one last thing I want to say: no matter which of these versions we do, they are going to be significantly less expensive than the pedestrian bridge we were talking about before, which was fully funded at the previous price. I understand the price has changed, the cost has changed, but there was a considerable amount of money that was allocated for the pedestrian bridge in its earlier iteration. And whichever version we do here, there is going to be money left over. There has to be money left over. And I want a pledge from the Parks Department that leftover money is going to be spent in Van Cortlandt Park, that it's not going to be distributed somewhere else, because that money was earmarked for connecting the east and west sides of Van Cortlandt Park, and that money should remain in Van Cortlandt Park. So that's a lot. Thank you very much for Deb for allowing me to speak. And if anybody wants to respond from the Parks Department, I'd be glad to hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Anybody from the Parks Department would like to respond?
I'll respond on the design question. Well, a couple of things. The switchback we were referring to is the black line, which is a long switchback through the woods at grade primarily. And the green line is the one where those stairs are. And that would be an elevated, very long ramp down where those stairs are now. So it would have to be, an elevated structure with a gentle slope coming down. And it would be, we made a nod to relative cost with the dollar signs in the key here. Agreed, either of these alternatives would be substantially less expensive than the pedestrian bridge, the budget in hand, but to build that elevated ramp, the green line would be more expensive than building at grade the black line. And just to speak about accessibility a bit, true, the trails aren't up to ADA standard through, and some of them don't even meet the kind of federal trail guidelines. But were we to make a major investment like this, where we're building, new connections, it would be difficult for us to make the argument that a new construction couldn't be made to meet ADA standards. So we would need to to go all the way to the ADA standard, even if it was, meeting a trail that wasn't fully accessible. It's sort of an incremental process, and when you make a major expenditure, if you can do it without undue damage to the natural resource, you kind of need to bring it all the way up to universal accessibility. I'm going to let someone else from Parks step in on the question of the commitment of funds. That's not my territory.
Mike, I think your name's being called.
Thanks, Matt. Bob, we are supportive of keeping all the funding within the park. Right now, we're trying to see how much, these alternatives are costing. As you can see, Matt and his team are doing, Matt and his team are doing a lot of work now, trying to figure out, hearing the community out and getting which approach we should take. And we are supportive of keeping all the money within the park. And at the last, at the Coral Infiltration Monitoring Committee and the CB12 meeting, which we presented to earlier this month, we did say that if there are any projects that, perhaps you would like to see completed with this funding, please let us know as well.
Oh, I have no doubt that between community boards 12, 7, 8, and Stephanie Ehrlich, we can come up with some very worthwhile projects that could be funded, Mike.
We have a couple of our own, and I think that we definitely are going to be on the same page when it comes to a lot of these projects as well.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Leona.
Yeah, my question is very simple. I may have missed it at some point, but how much of this do you think, or maybe too early to say, is going to be new construction? Because just looking at it, it's cutting through the parade grounds. It's maybe cutting across the cross-country course. So I'm just wondering how much of this would be new construction, new pavement.
So these maps are, very little of this is new construction. It's just trying to make a connection from using primarily existing trails, places you can walk. We're just trying to find a way to visualize relative distance between these different options. The new construction is kind of limited to, might be better to go back a slide or two and you can see what's actually potentially new construction. So in these slides, the red would have been the proposed bridge. That would be the extent of the new construction. And we're now considering either the black or the green, and roughly the extent of new construction, although they're sort of overstating it because it's not even all of the black or the green, sort of from, I'm not sure I can really describe, from the Jerome 233rd intersection, and then in the black version where it meets the blue, and then in the green version from the Jerome 233rd intersection, and then goes over the Jerome Avenue Bridge, down a ramp, and meets sort of, Annie, can you point to where it kind of hits, connects back up to existing?
Yes, which color are we on right now?
Green.
Green, okay, green. So just this segment really would be the new enhanced construction, and the rest of it might be upgrades, but the rest of it is along existing trails.
Right, it does raise a good question. It seems like what you're proposing is existing pathways with a very small, very short area boardwalk, some landscaping, and a split rail fence. Is that about right?
Yes.
Good. So then presumably there would be a lot of other money left over to spend on potentially other projects in Van Cortlandt Park, or?
Yes, I want to add one really significant addition to your list, and that's traffic, calming improvements at the Jerome and 233rd intersection, and potentially others. And those kind of improvements can get very costly. So, and that's something we need to study with DOT. I'm not suggesting that it would use up all the money by any stretch. It's all on the ground, not up in the air. But you know, it likely involve moving curbs and building new ramps and restriping and narrowing lanes, and you know, it could start to add up.
Right.
And to Bob Bender's point, we would be looking at the entire intersection, not just one corner. We'd look at all 4 corners.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who's next? Jody, you want to go next, and then David?
Yes, thank you, Deb. Thank you for the presentation. I love the idea that you're using it to update existing infrastructure. That was music to my ears because I'm always like maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. I have 3 quick short questions. Could you just explain what the ADA requirements are? The last time I looked, probably more than a decade ago, I think it was the Forest Service said it just had to be a firm and stable surface. It didn't say paving. So could you just give us a quick thing so we all, when we say ADA accessible trail, we are on the same page? 2, I didn't hear an answer to Kim's question about whether the John Muir Trail length is longer than your proposed access length for them, whether this is shorter. And then why is Parks paying for a DOT interchange? Is there a possibility that DOT could do this as part of their Vision Zero traffic calming, and you could use the money to do both the black and the green trails? So those are my 3 questions. Under 2 minutes, Deb.
Nice job.
Okay, I'll take the ADA one first. So a lot of the trails aren't paved. The surfaces just need to be stable. It's true. It can be difficult for us to maintain stable surfaces, though I think the old Croton Aqueduct Trail is a good example of a stable, firm surface. It's the new construction pieces that would need to meet ADA. So distinguishing between trail accessibility guidelines, which are much more fungible, flexible, and don't reach the same standard, and then built structures that need to meet the universal accessibility ADA standard. So if we're talking in the green option on the right, where we would be building a ramp where there are now stairs, that ramp would need to be fully accessible. It would need to either stay under 5%, or it could go a little bit steeper up to 8.33% with handrails and landings. Given the drop that I think Bob pointed out, we would likely be doing 8.33% with handrails and landings. So I think that gets at the ADA question. The next question about DOT, we have started to reach out to DOT to talk about the intersections. I think it remains to be seen what kind of cost sharing arrangement we can make here. I don't know to what extent the communities around Van Cortlandt Park have been talking with DOT about traffic calming. So I don't know where it falls in their priority list, but we'll certainly do our best. And I think you made the pitch for both the green and the black. And that there is potential. I will say one of the things we're watching as the Natural Resources Group is limiting the impact on the forest, not just cutting down trees, but fragmenting the forest further. And so we might look at closing some of the trails you see now in white in exchange for the black trail, if we were to do the black and the green, we might close some other trails so that we could get larger patches of forest to get more function out of them.
So,
Did I get?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I always ask for more because we always get less.
I mean, I think it does raise a good question though about especially if you're thinking about eliminating some of the paths that are there now, of thinking about just the trail system in Van Cortlandt Park. And what I'm hearing is other people's concerns also, and I share them, about safety. There's definitely parts of this park that don't feel safe when you're walking by yourself. And so that says to me they need more positive use, and then there's certain parts, like for example, just south of Chandler, which I am more likely to be in, the fencing makes you feel isolated because you literally can't get between different parts of the park because you're often stuck between fences in Van Cortlandt Park. You're either stuck between highways or you're stuck between fences. And so reduction in fences, I think also would be something really worth looking at. And so like getting more community input and just on where the trails are, where we want to go, where we would use a bike versus walk, would be, and really, and where you would like to preserve as intact forest, I think would be a really great kind of community engagement process, because I think we might end up with a lot of better solutions where we're not getting in each other's way, and where we can get from Woodlawn to the parade grounds much more quickly and in a beautiful way. It's a beautiful park, and there's room for all of us in it. That's my 2 cents. Gerald, David Gilman, I promised you next, and then Geraldine.
Let Geraldine go first. She hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, Geraldine, floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm a resident of Woodlawn and have been very active in the park over the years. I also ride my bicycle, not in any of the places you were talking about, but that intersection, to go over to Chandler's recreation area, that intersection at 233rd and Jerome is just incredibly dangerous. And I just can't believe that you haven't already started talking to the DOT about what traffic calming they can do. I mean, there are so many big rigs that go through that intersection all the time, every minute they're going through. And everybody is, let me hit the pedal because I'm going onto the Deegan. The other thing I wanted to point out is that in 2016, the DOT did a survey of how many cars, trucks, vehicles use the Deegan. When they come in from Westchester County, you will not believe this figure. And this is a figure from 2016, a year, 46 million vehicles come from Westchester through our park. And I think that we deserve better than what we're getting, because we don't even have noise reduction. And you drive down on the New Jersey Turnpike and all of it is noise reduction. You walk along this area that they're talking about, fixing up. The noise from the Deegan is insane. It is just insane. So I think we have a lot of things to think about, for redoing this project and saving gobs of money. But I'm not so sure that we should save gobs of money, because a pedestrian bridge is a long-term, generational infrastructure project, which our children and our children's children will enjoy. And, I just think it's a shame to not remember that this should have been built 70 years ago, and that we shouldn't give it up, and that we can find the money. If we want to, we can find it. There is a wonderful program put out by the infrastructure, which Biden signed a few months ago, and they have in the Department of Transportation $1 billion available for the next 5 years to reconnect neighborhoods is the name of this program. And I don't see why we can't get 15 million. Other people are getting, other communities are getting 100 million. 15 million is nothing for them. And that would give us the bridge. That would do it. So why don't we think big instead of thinking small?
Great, thank you, Geraldine. Matt or Mike or Annie, would you like to respond to Geraldine?
Thanks, Geraldine. It's interesting hearing you talk about thinking big, because I've started to imagine really big, 100, 200 million, some kind of land bridge. You know, sometimes I think about how do we really solve this, because it is incredibly loud. And the more I look at this problem, and I'm admittedly relatively new to it, I just came in to start studying alternatives and, you know, look back and try to understand how we got to this point. And I don't see this this bridge, the Red Bridge, as you know, an experience that is going to be a generational improvement here. I don't. So I'm trying to understand. I mean, it is incredibly loud. It will be incredibly loud up on that bridge, and it won't address safety that we all agree needs to be addressed. And so I want to make sure we do something with this money that is really, really constructive and helpful, and that's certainly what I'm hoping we can do here. And I recognize that we're coming to you, asking you to consider a really big change. And I hear your frustration and
Matt, I'll quickly say, I was with you on a planning committee back in 2016 when we were, you know, talking about, and you were there when we were talking about the entrances and the exits to the bridge. So you've been in on this bridge for a long time.
I actually wasn't with the agency until 2019, so that must have been a different Matt.
Oh, you're Matt Donham. I was thinking about Matt Dorham. I am so sorry.
That is okay. That is okay.
My optometry just gave me some lousy glasses. I'm very sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, thank you, Geraldine. Okay, so I'm going to go. I've got three hands left. First, I'll go with Laura, and then Gail, because you haven't spoken, and then I'll finish off with David. Laura Spalter, the chair of Community Board 8.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that in 2014, Community Board 8 passed a resolution endorsing the Van Cortlandt Park Master Plan, of which this is part of. And I just feel it bears repeating that we voted with the understanding that surfaces of the trails will be permeable, non-toxic, flexible, and will meet the standards for adjacent wetlands. And I just feel it bears repeating as we're looking and examining trails that we keep them natural. Thank you.
Well said, Laura. Thank you. Gail? Gail, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. I live in Woodlawn. I am a bike rider. You know, I am certainly hoping that whatever solution we have is possible to be ridden on a bike. You know, it just feels to me, I'm following this. I'm looking forward to the walkthrough. I hope to attend that because I think that would help maybe allow me to see some of these, but I find it very hard to imagine wanting to walk over to 233rd and Jerome. And I keep hearing about keeping money in the park, and it feels like, you know, this project is just dying and getting minimal alternatives that the neighborhood isn't going to use. And that money is just going to be shifted towards other things when we were promised this. So I guess I don't have too much to add, except I did want to say that as another voice expressing my frustration at this project.
Thank you, Gail. And David Gelman.
Thank you. Yes. A key thing that, you know, I mentioned at the beginning is the safety. I think that 233 is a very fast and unsafe intersection. And we really do need to rely on DOT to help us come up with a better design. But I think what Gail's alluding to, it's probably not very pleasant to go all the way down to 233 to go across. I've driven across there and I've biked across there. And it is also very fast and fairly unsafe. But realistically, I think that's going to end up being the solution with the green trail and with the orange trail and the black trail, whatever. I just ask that Parks also come back to us, besides the design for the 233 Jerome intersection, with details of the various trails at that location, but also up at the John Muir, whether they are paved or whether they are gravel or just raw dirt or what have you. And that this underpass that I'm talking about, in and of itself, if it were to be built today, would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million. Okay, we are fortunate; it's there. We should take advantage of that and spruce it up, which would be tens of thousands of dollars, not tens of millions of dollars. So I hope that that will be an alternative. I think that we should find a way to make it pleasant and safe for the Woodlawn residents to go across John Muir, to go underneath the Deegan, and to explore all of the north, as well as those who want to go south because they want to get to soccer and rugby on the parade grounds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Gail's point about cycling. I care about cycling, but I don't want to pave that which is not paved, but I also don't want to tear up that which is paved to go back to dirt or stone. I hope that Parks will come back to us with two plans, 233rd and Jerome, and a good explanation of all the trails and their what they're made of and what their conditions are. Thanks.
Thank you, David. So just to kind of summarize, what I'm hearing is that there's still concern about the safety at the intersections, and just that it's really important not only to have it be safe at 233rd and Jerome, but also to consider how people are going to get to that intersection on bikes or walking, and to make that pleasant. If it's going along the tennis courts, whatever it is, that intersection should be pleasant. That we also should look further north. Up even the paved road that's near the nursery, that's a perfectly lovely section. Like maybe there's something that can be done there, but that what I'm hearing is that there's concerns that there's not enough positive uses. There's not enough people already there doing positive things. And so it doesn't feel safe, and it doesn't feel safe. I can speak to personally, like south, once you get close to Gun Hill Road, again, because there's just not enough people around. So like looking at the trails, making them more activated so that they feel more safe and the people then use them more, making the signage so it's clearer where you're going between trails, and giving real connections for the folks in Woodlawn and the folks in Norwood so that they can get in the park, have a really enjoyable walk or bike ride, and get to parade grounds safely, especially if they're children or seniors. I'm hearing the surfaces should be natural. If it's paved, it's okay to keep it paved, but if it's not paved, we really want you to think twice before you do anything that is impermeable, and that we want the money to stay in Van Cortlandt Park, preferably like either with the trails and making these trails coherent, and just working around this area in particular to give it the capital love that it deserves. And then finally, just engaging the community. I think discussions like this have been really fruitful, because you're really hearing from everybody about what we would love this park to be. And so far, I'm not hearing anybody saying, a canopy walk, that we're really asking for some pretty reasonable things and coherent system. And I think that is the once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of actually take a look at this park that is so divided by highways and fencing and golf courses, and figure out how to make it a public amenity that we can move through freely. That's part of the master plan. And we've got some money here to actually do it. And so let's engage the community and figure out how we want to have movement through the park happen. And also to So the paths that we don't want motorized vehicles on, we don't want bikes on, protecting those paths. And so ideally, I would love to have you come back to us, engage the community, get feedback, and then just come back to us and show us what you got. Does that make sense? Anything you'd like to add?
This is great feedback for us. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for coming and presenting this plan. It's great to see you kind of working through the feedback that we're giving you. And if there's we'd love to know more about walkthroughs and things. Yeah, David.
Very quickly, I'm glad you brought up that last point about vehicles. A grave disappointment that we've had with the Putnam Trail is that we were all, I'm not saying you or us, we were all surprised at how big a problem motorized vehicles were on the Putnam Trail. So part of what I would hope you'd come back to us with is a plan to prevent that. I couldn't tell you how, but it's been 3 years of experience in just Van Cortlandt, and we really need to have plans for how to stop it. Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'm gonna, unless you have anything you'd like to add, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the natural resources group, just talking about Alderbrook Stream. Who are the folks who are going to speak to Alderbrook?
I was going to introduce it. Hi, it's Christy again, but I'm going to kick it over to Becca Swadek, who's our Director of Wetland. Sorry, it's late. Director of Wetlands Restoration. So maybe if you can make Becca able to share her screen, that would be good.
I just need whoever is doing it now to stop. Is it Annie?
That's Annie.
Yeah, if Annie stops, then Becca can start.
I believe I did stop. Is it still showing?
It's still showing.
Yeah. Says, oh, stop share.
There we go. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. I last came and spoke to you all, I think in like September of 2021 about our Forever Wild program and some other happenings in the Southwest Bronx. So I was pleased to see that there's some interest in Alderbrook in Riverdale Park, a site that's I'm quite familiar with, but Becca here as our Director of Wetlands Restoration. She's going to talk about a citywide stream assessment that we did, what we know about Alderbrook, and some thoughts we have on how we could learn more and maybe do something. So I'll hand it over to Becca. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Christy, and thanks for inviting us. And I am going to apologize in advance for the disruption that my dog is inevitably going to create during this call. So please bear with me if I have to mute suddenly. But yeah, I just wanted to share some information about, past work that we've done in the park, from monitoring to restoration to help us kick off the discussion. So I'm going to go kind of back into some historical context to set the stage for kind of some of our management concerns, and then we can hear what you guys have to say. So just kind of going all the way back, historically, New York City had over 600 miles of streams. And I share a lot of this context to say, as many of you know, particularly with Tibbetts Brook daylighting, that we have buried and piped a lot of our streams underground, leaving us with just over 100 miles left in the city, Alderbrook being one of those remaining. But this, context of our historical development has really kind of, drives our management and the challenges that we have. So I kind of wanted to just kind of convey that up front. So parks, as far as what we do to restore and manage our streams, I just kind of wanted to also share some of our like values and the things that we're working towards when we do management. But we aim to restore and maintain biodiversity, balance, safe access for people while, being able to maintain and protect natural resources, We hope that, streams and floodplain forests and wetlands provide, important ecological functions too, from stormwater management to temperature regulation. So those are all of kind of the things that we're thinking of when we do any sort of work. As you know, too, just wanted to kind of provide the context of impervious cover within this drainage area. So this is zooming out to New York City. The city overall is about probably 60 to 70% impervious. The Alderbrook watershed in and of itself is kind of in the middle, just over 20% developed, but you still see a lot of those impacts. The literature basically tells us at this point that we start to really see stream and ecosystem functions start to degrade once you hit about 10% impervious surface within the watershed. So I just kind of wanted to also share that from some of the challenges. Alderbrook watershed doesn't look that bad in context, but there is still a lot of impervious surface that provide challenges to doing any work in this area. And also, that we really have to be able to address to be successful long term. So stormwater has many impacts on stream ecosystems, from providing garbage and trash and, polluting water quality to, eroding banks in some areas and then depositing sediment in lower areas, which I know you guys have also experienced in Alderbrook. It also can facilitate the establishment of non-native species in the floodplain, which can also help deteriorate additional functions as well. They don't necessarily capture stormwater. It deteriorates floodplain function, in addition to impacting habitat. So I wanted to share a little bit more about kind of what we've done historically in Alderbrook. In the 2000s, we had a series of state grants from the Bond Act and Environmental Protection Fund to do stream restoration and forest management. So the photo on the left, if you can see my cursor, is before the Bond Act restoration in about 2003, 2004, and then afterwards in roughly 2007. So part of this work involved stabilizing this gully right here at the top of the slope, and then removing sediment from this floodplain or the small wetland downstream, and really kind of stabilizing that channel and restoring native vegetation in the floodplain and in the freshwater wetland itself. I think we knew historically that a lot of this work would undo itself, which you'll see, but I think it happened a little bit faster than we had anticipated. And this project has been was initially managed by Marit Larson, who I think is on the call right now. So we still have just a lot of that historical knowledge of what's worked and what's not worked in this park in the past. And it's also been managed by one of our foresters who's still on staff and routinely does work in the park, which I know Christy can share more about too. So some of the current conditions, we did a citywide stream assessment in 2016 and looked at Alderbrook. So as I said, a lot of the concerns that we try to, really tackle in restoration need ongoing maintenance to continue to address. So, we still have some sedimentation and invasive species that have reestablished in the site. There's a lot of debris in the stream channel that we're aware of. Again, a lot of sedimentation. And one of the biggest challenges, it's kind of tying back to the development, is that the stream is really, really stormwater driven. It has narrow culverts both coming into the park or into the stream and into the park and out of the stream in the park. And this is the downstream one is often blocked. And as if it's too undersized and additionally blocked, that water can't exit the stream and causes additional sedimentation and invasive species, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem kind of persists. And like I said, I think we really knew in the restoration that would happen eventually, but I think a lot of those problems recurred faster than anticipated at this site. And so as a result of that restoration, but also our citywide assessment, we came up with a series of recommendations. citywide for work. And at Alderbrook in particular, we had recommended managing the floodplain of the buffer and continuing to, manage invasive plants and debris and revegetating as appropriate. But most critically, we really need stormwater management upstream to be able to absorb stormwater coming into the park, really capture it, slow it, detain it, capture sediment to really be able to make some of those interventions more sustainable. But, we can't undo literally centuries of a development. So, trying to restore that historical watershed hydrology by managing stormwater is one of the most critical things that we can do, but it really also has a high maintenance need. And that cost estimate is to be determined. So those are just recommendations that we have at this point. We don't have any funding for this work or any ongoing work in the park. It's really just done ad hoc. But I kind of wanted to share this background to kind of help kick off and frame a discussion. And I think that's all I have.
Yeah,
and looking forward to hearing more from you.
That's great. Maybe I'll add one more thing, I guess. So to lead into, we're looking forward to hearing what you guys at CB8 have seen and what made you want to talk about this today and how we can help. And then, I just wanted to give a shout out to Barbara Trees and her team. She's the crew leader that works in this park. She's worked in this park for years. And so we do have, stewardship going on in the park. It was mentioned at the top of the hour, the event on Sunday in Riverdale. We are doing work in the park, but something of this caliber hadn't. You guys just brought it on our radar, basically. So let's talk about it and we can go from there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Do you want to stop sharing for the moment? Because I think probably don't need it. I know you can see each other better. Jane, you had your hand up first. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I live on Spalding Lane. I live on Alderbrook. And I can tell you that about the time you started your restoration work, the Windsor Apartments paved a lot more of their land for parking, and their drains dumped directly into Alderbrook. So we're getting twice as much water as we've ever gotten before. I mean, I've lived here for 45 years, and that stream used to dry up in the summer. It now runs heavily year round. So if Parks and DEC can do anything and get the Windsor to manage their stormwater on their property, I think it would go a long way toward making sure that your restoration work remains intact. The other problem that's on private property, and I'm sort of talking to him, one of my neighbors, is during those last two huge storms we had 18 months ago, it dumped a lot of rock down across from the entrance to the Riverdale School in the brook. And so the water has now found its way under the wall and under the road and is seeping out on the road because it can't flow through the stream bed. So I'm trying to get Jack to kind of restore his section of that so that the water flows more easily than it is now. So I sort of keep track of from the park up to through Alderbrook, the residential area, and at least 3 of us had to rebuild our stream beds after those storms. So it's going to be a big problem because we're just going to keep getting more and more of those storms. But I think getting the Windsor to manage their own stormwater would help a lot.
What's the Jane? Can you just tell me what is the Windsor? Is it a development?
Windsor North and South. There are 2 big apartment buildings on Henry Hudson Parkway.
Oh, okay.
Right at the entrance to Spalding Lane. And they redid their parking lot about in the early 2000s. So they paved over so the cars could park outside. And we were told they were going to rip up the pavement after that when the garage was finished, and they never did.
I see.
And I actually stealthily dumped a dye down that drain to see where that water was going. And it eventually came out in my front yard.
Right.
The stream. So I know that's where the water's going.
Right. Okay.
I applaud everything that Parks is doing down there because that park is much more heavily used than it was when I moved here in 1980. And the people who use it really care about it. There's not a lot of garbage in there. They pick it all up and and they
Yeah.
pick up after their dogs, and they really appreciate everything Parks is doing. So thank you for that.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I've spent some time with some of the stewards in Riverdale, and it is a special place. I agree.
Yeah,
Thank
it's not
you.
even the stewards, it's the dog walkers.
Just- anyone can be a steward, right?
Right. They also throw the bicyclists out.
Also, just as a shout out, we have a lot of stewards in Spuyten Duyvil, Kingsbridge Heights. I don't want to leave anybody out. Speaking of stewards of Spuyten Duyvil, Jody Colomb.
Hi there. So Christy, I've been very busy since I last dragged you out to Shorefront Park. I've recruited 4 super stewards for Riverdale Park. They have their permits, 1 for Wallenberg, and now 2 for Shorefront, including myself. So we've been pretty busy, and I've been
Awesome.
out on the trails with Liz and Leah and Tina and Gabriella. So people are really pitching in, which is really great. The answer to your question as to why is this on the radar is I put it there. Since I retired, I've been walking the parks a lot more, and I noticed how degraded Alderbrook had become. And I reached out to Jane, since I know it runs through her property. And thank you, Jane, for being able to attend and explain what's been happening. I believe I also split this project into the park part, and then in the environmental and sanitation budget requests, I put the upland part for stormwater maintenance. So this was on fiscal year 24's budget request, and we were revisiting it for fiscal year 25 requests to see what really needed to be done. So that's how it got on the radar. And I'm so glad that you've already started to look at it and do some cost projections and things like that. The original renovation was spectacular. I was so impressed. You actually beat back knotweed down there, and we had glassy ibis and all kinds of water birds came back. So there was interpretive signs. So it would be great almost 20 years later to revisit it. So thank you for being ahead of the game on this.
Yeah. And to provide context to what Jody's saying, just to interrupt for a minute, is that our budget priority, the response that we got back from the agency was that they needed more information and to study this before they could consider it. And so that's also part of why we were asking, like, what do we, clearly we're not phrasing this in the right way. We're not asking for the right things. We're not plugged into what your priorities are or what you're seeing on the ground. And so we wanted to try to have our budget priority reflect, kind of like integrate what you're seeing as well. So I guess that would be my ask, is like, what can we do? Like, what should our budget priority be in order to, you know, to effectively manage the upstream stormwater, also knowing how Parks funds maintenance, which is not regularly. And so so that's my question. Jody, does that kind of, or is that all, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or can we jump to like trying to frame?
That's exactly what I was asking, is how can we help this happen, because we know it is a monetary request and we're getting a needs more info thing. So I think you're right. It's I kind of just made a bucket phrasing and had sent it to Christy in last year. So I think we need language for how to phrase this for you, for Community Board 8 to consider it in their budget requests.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jody. So Becca or Christy, do you have any suggestions in terms of what we're asking for? David, I'm just gonna kind of, I want to hear from them for a moment, and then I'll come back to you if that's okay. In terms of how to phrase it, like what should we be asking for in order to kind of once again revisit this brook and get it healthy again?
Sure. I'll just say, I mean, I think we haven't looked at it in a while in really solid detail, nor have we really, you know, scoped out a project of any sorts. And so I think we probably circle up internally and look at, you know, across our teams and kind of see what, you know, what it looks like we could actually do. I know we're due for a site visit basically, and so we can do that and come back to you guys with some more concrete suggestions, I think.
Yeah,
I know
like
Christine,
basically you are saying the right thing. I mean, saying, or Park, I think you did say the right thing, and Park saying that we need to study it more is totally accurate. Like we have these citywide, like highest level cost estimates by comparing all the streams to each other and looking at broad categories, but we need to refine for you. And that's what Becca was saying we can start on now. So message received.
Okay, so we'll kind of keep the language roughly the way it is. Maybe we'll add some language around stormwater management, upstream stormwater management. And I think probably for the purposes of us, I mean, in thinking about maintenance, if we can get it to a place where it can be maintained by stewards and volunteer groups, then that's manageable within our footprint, probably much better, because we do have active volunteer groups. Jody organizes things all the time, but we have 4 or 5 active groups. And I'm sure there's potential for organizing more, if needed.
And it could be the super stewards wetland maintainer training.
Exactly.
And so I just wanted to add one thing about regs that have changed since the original parking lot expansion that you mentioned. If that happens again, I mean, like we always try to leverage anything that is upcoming, like any improvements upcoming, to take advantage of opportunities to do stormwater management. If you're repaving, you're regrading, there's your opportunity to do that right there. But there is a change to the city's unified stormwater rule that will now require any new impervious area over 5,000 square feet to require stormwater management. So I don't know how, scale wise, as far as what that parking lot that they have is, but that's just one thing to think about. If you guys do see any new developments, that is a way to kind of, watchdog it effectively and make sure that is included in new projects.
So I thought that was only for new development, like net new buildings or net new parking lots, not repaving an existing parking lot.
Yes, it might not be for repaving anything new, but anything new, or sorry, repaving anything existing, but anything new. Just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that.
Yeah, that was new, but it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the little association we have here, we're pretty on top of when people do any kind of renovation. In fact, somebody up in Alderbrook just put in a circular drive, and I said you can't pave it and have the water run off on somebody else's property. And they actually put in those honeycomb things, and they're going to grow grass through them. So, I mean, I think, as a neighborhood, I think we're doing our best, but it's hard when some big apartment building's doing something upstream.
Mm-hmm. David Gelman.
Yes, quick question for Rebecca. You mentioned that there was collection of debris on the downstream side of culverts. Now I could see why I would get caught on the upstream side, because it's flowing downstream and gets caught at the culvert. Why would it get caught afterward?
Sorry, the downstream end of the stream at the upstream end of the culvert. You are correct in where.
Oh, okay. All right.
Downstream end of the stream. Yeah.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you both so much for coming and
Deb,
staying. Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
have
Jody,
one more question. Yes.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
raised
go
his
for it.
hand. So just if you could advise us, as I did mention, because we didn't realize that Parks also did like watershed management and upstream. So we intentionally separated this into 2 budget requests to 2 different agencies, so that Parks got the piece that was in Riverdale Park, and DEP got the part that was outside of the park. Do we
That's
need
not wrong.
both? Oh, no. Okay. So I was just wondering if we needed both requests still, or we should lump them together.
I think we should keep them together. And then I think also we have, we'll be adding to, I'll just get to this when we get to the budget priorities, but Wave Hill, that swale that David brought up at our last meeting, and maybe this will be of interest to the Natural Resources Group folks, but the cobbles that are in front of Wave Hill from 249th down to Spalding Lane, Wave Hill has said that that is their property. That's Parks property. And so that'll be added to one of our budget priorities as well, to refurbish that swale so that it's more effective. So that may also help with some of the Alderbrook runoff. So if that can be maybe made even more impervious so that it stays and it's not all cobble running down. Jane, did you have a question about that? I saw your hand go up.
No, I just wanted to point out that project, I was here when they did that project. And they ran
cobbles?
that water through catch basins to the end of their property on Spalding Lane, tied it into an existing culvert that crossed over to my side and my neighbor's property, and then just had the water shooting out against the stone wall. And when we got them all there and said, you can't do that, they said, oh, well, just punch a hole in the wall and it can go into Alderbrook. And I said, no, you won't, because that's private property. Now the problem is the whole side down Spalding Lane on Wave Hill side is collapsing. It's completely hollow underneath. And we've informed Wave Hill. They said they know about it, but they're not doing anything. And my worry is that one of those buses going down to the school is going to roll over to get out of the way of somebody and just go right straight through. So it's really critical.
Okay, that's good to know.
That just happened, Deb, like 2 weeks ago. I happened to walk over there and say, why is there a hole here? And it's just hollow.
Okay. Because I mean, they're very eager to
Parallel
fix
to the
it.
catch basins. Parallel.
Hollow on the north side of
Yes,
Spalding? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go by there.
it's
'cause I'm
right
the
across
closest.
from my driveway, David. I'm the stone and stucco house in the middle of the hill.
Oh, okay, it's good. No, I'm probably the closest board member to the site.
Yeah,
I
well,
will
it's,
start, I'll look at this week.
yeah. I mean, that project was a disaster from the beginning because they weren't really managing the water. They were just getting it away from their wall.
That's a good question, though. You know, it is a parks property. And if there's a water management that could be improved at the Wave Hill site, is that something where you would work with them to try to make some guidance, to give some guidance on best practices or alternatives to protect Alderbrook? I mean, there's a lot of property there on site that could absorb the water. I don't know how it works interjurisdictionally, you know, or if that's not a thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely feasible. I think we'd have to look at it a little bit more to understand the, situation to be able to provide some concrete recommendations. But yeah, I think we could certainly look at that.
Yeah, this is not a game of corner Becca. Wasn't sure.
And then depending on what sort of agreement they have with parks, if it is in fact parkland, you're saying there's those agreements always spell out like who's responsible for what happens in a situation X or Y. So, it could lead to looking at that, taking a closer look at that to determine what the roles are. But certainly advising is something we always love to do.
It's a little more complicated. It's not actually parks property.
Right? Yeah, I didn't think it was actually.
Independence and Spalding are, Independence is a mapped private street. Spalding is an unmapped private city street. So the right of ways halfway out are owned by the property owners. So
Yeah,
I
7
own
feet.
half of Spalding Lane I don't really own it. I own the right of way.
Right.
I'm responsible
Interesting.
for maintaining it. So Wave Hill is responsible for maintaining their whole perimeter wherever it is because they
Yeah.
Well, Mike Ortiz, we talked about this last month. Do you have any updates on these responsibility issues?
Well, no, David, we've spoken to Wave Hill, and that Wave Hill themselves acknowledges that they are responsible for 7 feet out from their stone wall. So their right of way goes all the way to the center line, as the same way that James describing. And then they've asked for help to get funding. They estimate that it's probably $250,000 to $300,000 to address the swale.
I think that's a gross underestimate.
Agreed.
Really, I mean, David, you've walked it, obviously, if you're in the neighborhood, it's the whole thing is just completely come apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're only talking about a 120-yard section from 249 to down to Spalding.
To Spalding
the
Lane.
top of Spalding.
Yeah.
At the moment. at the
At
moment.
the moment, we could
But the
maybe,
piece down
Yeah.
Spalding is a wreck too. That whole thing is all torn up and eroded out, and it does. I have videos of it crossing the street. I have water videos of
is
a lot of.
is there swale on that section as well?
Yes.
Yes.
It's swale all the way.
Well, there used to be. There's not much left of it.
I see. Okay, that's why that makes sense. Okay. So maybe we need to extend what the budget request is. I'm sure they're not gonna mind to extend it further down Spalding. Okay. All right, any last questions before I let Christy and Becca go? Thank you both for hanging on and joining the meeting. It was really helpful to have you. And this is and we'll follow up on kind of next steps, and please be in touch if you have more to share about what you learn when you go study Alderbrook.
Will do. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have
I'll
a good
just
night.
say that if Christy and Rebecca, if you come out, I'm happy, if you'll notify me, I'm happy to walk the above the park length of Alderbrook with you and just show you points where I know there have been problems.
Same
That'd
for
be
me.
great. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights, Jane.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Thank you for coming. It's great. So now I'm going to move on to something I wanted to just talk to the committee about, which is the Van Cortlandt golf course. We've raised it before in terms of condition, but I thought it would be helpful to just share a presentation that has some pictures and kind of puts things into context, and just to kind of get us all on the same page of how deteriorated the condition of the golf course is in the concession. So can you see my my PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So Van Cortlandt Golf Course is a concession. It's an 18-hole golf course with a full-service clubhouse and food service facility, and there's an option for a full-scale restaurant banquet facility. The contract period that Forest Park Golf Course is currently in, it started May 14th, 2007, and will go through May 31st of 2027. So we're getting towards the last few years of it. Just to give you an idea of kind of what the concession payments are, the concession payments are expected to be made May 1st each month until November 1st, the kind of the height of the season. They were set at a certain per monthly rate from 2017 to 2022, and then they jumped up again in 2022 to 2027. And that was basically every few years that kind of, there'd be a nominal increase. So from 2017 until 2022, they were expected to pay $475,000 annually for the use of the concession to run it as a business. Or 19% of green fees and cart rentals and percentages of all of the various items that they rent and sell, whichever is the greater. So one important thing to know about the concession revenue, just in general, because this comes up with New Yorkers for Parks, they're advocating to have the concession revenue actually stay with the Parks Department. This concession revenue it goes to the city's general fund. It does not stay in Van Cortlandt Park. It does not stay necessarily in the Bronx, and it doesn't stay in the Parks Department. It goes just to the general fund. So even though the concession is operating here in Van Cortlandt Park, along with the other golf course, the stables, things like that, if they don't provide public good for the community, the money itself is not necessarily providing a public good for the immediate community. One of the things I wanted to raise, and this is how this originally got on my radar, is this birding bridge. So this birding bridge has been one of our budget priorities for several years now. It closed to the public in February 24th of 2017. I know that day because I happened to find the Facebook post that announced that it was closing. It is part of the linkage for the John Kiernan Trail. And it also happens to connect holes 9 and 10 on the golf course. The way it's supposed to work is that it's supposed to be a walkway here. And then this is the path that is used by the golf. Yeah. So as you can see, the fence is in very bad shape, and the people have made creeping holes to try to get onto this bridge so they can get across the water. and continue on hiking on the trail. And then generally this keeps getting closed up again because the concession does not want people using this for walking because they're using it for the carts. Let's see what, oh, do I not have, I'm realizing this presentation here, let me find I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I've got a version of this that has a picture of what the golf course is supposed to look like, or what that bridge is supposed to look like. I wonder where it is. Just one second. Technical difficulties, of course. Let's see. Let me try this one. There we go. It's worth stopping for a minute to find it because it's a drastic change. This is what it looks like now. This is what it looked like back in like 2015, 2016. And you can see this is a nice trail and continues. And this was the view that you would see if you stood over here. So, you know, that's why it's called the birding bridge. It's like part of the park that allows for just very good bird watching. In terms of its location, this was one thing I also was never really clear about when we were discussing this as a budget priority. Here is the parade ground in Van Cortlandt Park. And the birding bridge is actually here. And the Putnam is kind of running between the two golf courses here. So it's just like a little hop, skip, and a jump off of the Putnam across this wetland area, and then kind of goes back into the trail back here. And it's also included, I include this because this is the drawing from the contract itself, which indicates that the bridge is here. Because one of the issues originally when we were talking about this as a budget priority was who is supposed to be paying for this. And it seems clear from just simply looking at the diagram that's included in the contract that this is very much a part of the golf concession. Also part of the golf concession is the East Coast Greenway. So this is the path that runs along over to like a little loop-de-loop over here in the Mosholu extension. The golf house would be here on the left. So this is always washed out. It's been washed out for years. And as you can see, there's just substantial water damage that makes it pretty rough and unsafe if you're on a bike to ride on. This is also very much a part of the responsibilities of the concession, and they're supposed to be repaving both the parking lot and these pathways around the golf house. Also, there's the golf house. It has boarded up windows on the one side, little broken windows, holes in the eaves. It's just not in great physical shape. I really don't understand what's going on with the window, why that would not be repaired. Additionally, the restaurant has very limited hours. The hours are not posted. Prices are not posted. It's like some of these very basic things are not done. And that the terrace is often closed for private events, which I understand because they're using that as a rental. But still, if there was better communication, this is a public building, this is a public concession. And so one would expect that there would just be better communication about when it would be open, and it's a requirement in the contract to post these things. And then finally, the golf course fencing. I mean, if you've been in Van Cortlandt Park, you know the state of it. In many cases, it's rusted. In many cases, it's leaning. In parts, it's missing or has peepholes or sneak holes. It's covered in vines in the summer. It's covered in the remains of vines and branches in the winter, and that it tends to make it difficult to see, and so it's easy to kind of not feel particularly safe in certain parts of the park, in particular, because of the debris and stuff that's around the fences. Those are just frankly a barrier to park pedestrian circulation and safety, which isn't necessarily a criticism of the Van Cortlandt Golf House itself, but it's just certainly we could do better when it comes to just thinking about the fencing. And so I wouldn't say, I wouldn't advocate myself this strongly because we have to replace all this fencing, but we certainly need to do something about this fencing and that responsibility of the concession. I want to just point out in terms of inspections, the golf course is inspected and has 25 hazards or negative conditions in 2022. Mike has brought this up before, that sometimes it doesn't take much to get on the wrong side of an inspection, but generally the hazards themselves, like supports in danger of collapsing, are just generally a little bit more serious. This really points to issues with weeds and overgrowth, paved surfaces, things like that. So any questions so far about kind of the conditions of the golf house? I wanted to raise this because I feel as though, it's something that is been kind of riding under the radar for some time. And that, while we are in a moment where we're just a few years out from renegotiating, or not renegotiating, from the concession going out for proposals again, that it's a good moment to say what's working, what's not working, and what would we like this concession to do better, particularly as they're kind of getting towards the end of this. So yeah, David, what would you like to?
I'm just curious, do we have any, to be fair, do we have any information on how they did on revenues in 20 and 21? Because there probably were city regs about how many people could be out on the course and whatnot.
I don't have any financial information about this.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of a first step. This is just to kind of raise awareness. My thought was really like, the next step would really just to be to ask the concessions unit if what their understanding is of it, and if they've been working with the golf course to improve conditions, if maybe they have plans already in place, to replace the birding bridge. We just don't really know. And so it's really just a way of kind of getting like level setting on what the current conditions are, and then starting to explore a little bit like what's happening,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Bob, you want to go, and then Jane?
Yeah, I believe Stephanie's still on the call. The birding bridge, as I understand it, is partly funded, but I think there are requirements. From what I understand, we can't simply replace the old wooden bridge, which was quite functional when it was there until it deteriorated. There's now some requirement that the bridge has to be upgraded from the bridge that was there before, but I think Stephanie knows the situation better than anybody else in terms of where we are in the funding and how much we have and how short we are. And I would like to hear from her about the birding bridge.
Thanks, Bob. Yes, so a couple things. One is that the birding bridge was just kind of an extension of the existing formal bridge. It was made out of wood. It was, as I understand it, it was installed about 20 years ago by the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park. And it was kind of attached to the existing Real Bridge, which is a DOT inspected bridge. It did deteriorate, and we, Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, removed it about a year ago, or actually going back almost 2 years ago at this point. So going back to 2014, I think it is, then State Senator Klein put $543,000 into the budget for improving the birding bridge, and that is in a holding pattern because, exactly as you said, Bob, the bridge has to be if they build something new, it has to be up to a different standard than what it was. It can't just be some wood that is attached to an existing bridge. The folks at NRG have done some work. This is wetland, and so there's also been some engineering studying done by parks to kind of understand what's needed. And There is a permit that's out with DEC so that there can be some borings that can be done to rebuild the Birding Bridge, but that is all sort of in a little bit of limbo because we haven't gotten the permit back from DEC yet, and that we being Parks.
So Stephanie, do you know what the shortfall is at the present time between what you have and what it would take to replace it at the standards that would now be required?
I don't, because we really haven't even gotten to that point. Some of the issues are actually similar to the other bridge issues, which are that if you improve the bridge itself, you then have to do improvements on either side of it to make sure that there's access. So there is not there isn't an estimate yet. But
Yeah, well,
500
access is going to be a big problem because, as you know, on both sides of that bridge, the surface is very uneven and not accessible by any realistic standard.
Exactly.
So then, so where would that leave us? Like in terms of I mean, do we know that the side that's being used by the concession, do we know that that bridge is definitely going to stay and that we're only talking about an extension of some sort, or what are we, or are we really just talking about replacing this bridge regardless? The whole bridge?
Well, I'm not actually sure who else, if NRG is still on the phone. Is anyone still? There's some concern because it is a wetland. It might be prudent to just have one bridge that is able to accommodate carts and pedestrians rather than building two separate bridges. The existing bridge, as I understand it, is not in great shape, so it needs substantial work. It is, again, like as I understand it, it's up to the concessionaire to be fixing the bridge, but I don't know the status of that.
I mean, I see that Becca's still on the call, but she may have signed off. I mean, like.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of context from the wetland standpoint. So one of the things too, part of the, like Stephanie said, part of the permit we have out right now is for borings to basically see how stable the soil is and what type of footings anything would need. But to reconstruct anything, we really want to avoid wetland impacts to begin with, because if we do impact the wetland and DEC determines that it's, significant, we have to offset those impacts by doing mitigation, and that the acreage and size will, very quickly balloon the cost of the project. And then we have to, find ways to do that, which is not as straightforward for freshwater wetlands, at least in New York City, as one might expect. So, that's just one other significant caveat. Ideally, we would be able to do something to where it would be, any footings would be installed in the upland outside of the regulated area and on either side. And that way we wouldn't have any additional impacts from it. But if footings have to go in the wetland themselves, then there certainly will be. So it's, it's basically more cost depending on which way you look at it.
Right. Is it made more complicated by the fact that it's also golf carts we're talking about going over it, and it's not just pedestrians and wheelchairs and ADA?
Yeah, definitely weight loading impacts that for sure.
Okay.
I was going to add that I think the solution that would have the least impact on the natural resource would be to build a single bridge that performed, both functions.
Definitely.
Hopefully it won't get as expensive as the pedestrian one over the Deegan.
Jane.
Only hope.
I have two questions. One is the concessionaire the same concessionaire that's been there for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they've never done anything. So
Yeah, concessionaire since 2007.
Yeah. And my second question is if the part of the bridge that the concessionaire is responsible for also needs to be replaced, then the same regulations apply. as to
Correct.
the- So I'm hoping that when they come out to do borings, they're gonna do borings for thinking about if they're gonna do one bridge, a whole big bridge.
Right.
I would not hold my breath for this concessionaire doing anything that he does not have to do immediately.
Well, I just wonder about the safety of this bridge, considering the age of it and the obvious physical condition of it, and that they've got, a weight bearing, I mean, they've got golf carts going over it. And so, I feel like that would be something for the concession group as well and Parks Department to just, review this and inspect this bridge. Because we just don't want, we don't want a hazard here, and and I could totally see. I mean, I agree with you. I think that it seems just as an observer that the concessionaire will do as little as they can to repair this bridge.
Yeah, I was part of the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park when we built the birding bridge, and we had a lot of trouble with the concessionaire because we really wanted to use the bridge that was already there.
Right.
And they just said no.
Well, and the fact that we can't use this bridge now when there is no other bridge
Right.
is also troubling for a public. I mean, this is not acceptable as a form of egress across a wetland in order to continue hiking.
Right.
It's disappointing. Neva, what would you like to say?
Bridge there anyway. Since people are going onto the golf course bridge, can we make it where there's vegetation to discourage people from going that way, period?
People are going on the, Stephanie, do you want to speak to that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think what Neva was asking was, what kind of deterrents are you using? Are you to prevent people from continuing to make these sneak holes in the fence? And would planting green matter or something help in this case?
Do we necessarily need a bridge going from that area it goes to the parade ground? Since it's not there, it hasn't been there for a while, can we just build it up with more greenery rather than replacing it?
I think that you do need a bridge to get across. And I don't think that greenery on the left side would be sufficient to block things. There's nothing for the plantings to go into. It's kind of hard to tell from this photo, but that's mostly water. So you wouldn't really be able to plant it up in that way. And we have at numerous times we have closed those sneak holes, and they just get opened back up.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So I know it's getting late, so I want to just jump to a couple of important points. One is just simply in terms of what the expectations are contractually, they are expected to remove heavy brush around the greens as needed. They are expected to regrade, pave, and restripe, and that they've got a schedule for when they're supposed to do the parking lot, which 2022 was one of those years. Providing the fencing and landscaping is their responsibility. And keeping all the paths, walkways, fencing in good order is one of their maintenance responsibilities. As far as capital improvements, there is a Schedule D that outlines the expected course improvements in the contract. And generally, they've already spent, I'm going to assume, the money that was expected of them by Parks Department when they initially signed the contract back in 2017. Which comes close to $4 million already spent. They were expected to spend an additional $750, included as part of this, by 2016. And then from 2022 to 2026, per their contract, they're expected to spend another $250,000. in terms of capital improvements, which you can see that it's, obviously it needs that kind of investment. And then one piece that I didn't realize until I actually read the contract was just public access. I'm not aware of them doing any public programming or allowing really easy public access. And so they're supposed to post their hours. They're supposed to get their hours approved by the commissioner and post them each year. They're not supposed to close for private activities during public hours. Unless it's a special thing that they've gotten permission from the Parks Department on. And then with programming, they are expected to promote and conduct a junior development or youth program with scholarship and fee-based membership. They're supposed to be doing free on-course access for park-sponsored youth instruction and development. And they're supposed to submit a report annually of the community and youth programs that they're doing within 30 days of the end of the operating year. And so I am not aware of them doing this. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but the existence or the requirement of the report is, I think that's great, because it means we can actually kind of see what it is, and if it's a problem of just it not being communicated, or if it's a problem of it just simply not happening, and in which case, then we've got a problem we need to talk to the concessions unit about. So as far as next steps, the questions I've got from this so far are just really, what are the hours of operation for the snack bar and the kind of the public areas? Are they posted anywhere? Which of the required golf course improvements remain to be completed? They had a whole list of expected golf course improvements in the contract. Just, are they all done? Is that something that we can check off the list, or are there things that are still planned to be done? Are there capital improvements that they have been doing since 2016? Are there capital improvements that they got in the hopper to do in the improvement or in the approval process? And staffing for 4 park rangers is part of their staffing plan. Why don't we have that? We don't seem to have that. And is there youth programming? Those were the kind of the obvious things that really stuck out for me, in addition to kind of getting an update from the concessions unit on the work that we see that needs to be done for maintenance and the capital expense on the birding bridge. So what I would like to do as the next step is to just simply send a letter to the concession unit, attach this part of this presentation that's really the pictures and the park inspections, so that they can see what we see. They don't need this golf course concession part at the beginning, obviously, and just ask them kind of what they're already following up on, and what we can expect. I mean, it would be great if they would come to maybe speak to the committee in April, but I'm happy to just have them follow up. Bob, your hand is up. What would you like to say?
Yeah, just one thing, Deb. First of all, you're exactly right. What we have to do is we have to get somebody from the Franchise and Concessions Division of the Parks Department to come in. What this is ultimately going to come down to is whether there is actually competition for this concession. If there isn't, then the concessionaire really holds all the cards. If there is some competition, if there are 2 or more bidders, then the Parks Department is in a better position to enforce these regulations. And I don't know what that situation is. What I really would like to find out is what kind of outreach the Parks Department Franchise and Concessions Group does in anticipation of the termination of this contract in 2027. Because if we don't get somebody else in here, and my recollection is, I could be wrong, and Stephanie will correct me if I am, the last time the stables concession came up, there was only 1 bidder. So, it leaves you in a situation where there isn't a whole lot you can demand from the concessionaire. And even if they don't come through with what they're supposed to do, what are your alternatives? Right. So, getting somebody in here from that unit of the Parks Department and getting a little more information about how they solicit offers for the concession is a necessary next step.
Okay, I think that sounds great. And also if there are things we can do to improve the odds, right? I don't know where the line is in terms of, making sure that people are aware of the RFPs, making sure that they get posted in all the right places. I would think that the oldest public golf course in America would be kind of actually a really cool, great course that somebody would want to be connected to. But to your point, who knows if there's any outreach happening? Okay, all right, great. Anything else? And we can move on to budget priorities. Okay, all right, great. So let me get the budget priorities going here. Thank you to everybody who submitted budget priorities and rankings. This is where we ended up. So, and we've got a couple of things to add. So redesign and reconstruction of Bailey Playground, I left at number 1 because it was number 1 last year. We can debate whether we want to change that. Establishing the PEP Patrol Command, I left it in the top 3. These are the top 3 that we left over from last time. We can discuss whether we want to move them. Parks District equipment, Drone Park Reservoir pedestrian safety lighting, a restoration of Lower Brush Park staircase, Marble Hill playground lighting were all the ones that got the most votes of everybody. They all got all 4 votes apiece.
Deb, can you narrow 1, 4, and 5 columns so we can actually see the
narrow 1, 4, and 5 column? I mean,
A, D, and E, which have almost nothing in them.
There you go. I think actually all you need is really A and C.
Or B and C.
Or sorry, B and C.
Okay, all right, that's better.
Make them bigger too.
Yes.
So we got right. So we got reconstruction of Bailey Playground, PEP, Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, Parks District equipment, the garbage truck, Drone Park Reservoir pedestrian safety lighting, the restoration of Lower Brush Park staircase, Marble Hill playground lighting, and then starting at reconstruction. Oh, is this one? Yeah, starting at reconstruction of Old Fort 4. These got 3 votes. So all the way down to here. So Old Fort 4 reconstruction got 3 votes. Updating the play equipment at Fort Independence and reconstructing Washington's Walk, and then the crew cab, Riverdale playground basketball equipment, and Hackett Park. Got 2 votes or 1 vote. So that's where the rough rank is. And then I had Stephanie take a look at the Van Cortlandt Park priorities. So number 1 was equipment for litter collection within Van Cortlandt Park. Number 2 was conversion of the temporary golf house to permanent park administration building. Number 3 is the engineering study of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium. The Van Cortlandt Park Mansion stairway restoration, the Bailey pedestrian plaza, and then the park fencing and entrances along the Yonkers border. Oh, and then ADA access to the Northwest Forest. And then we have a new one, which was the reconstruct Wave Hill Swale, which we should find a spot for up above. And then as far as other stuff that was kind of on the list that was going to be investigated, Ewan Park erosion control. I spoke to stewards of Ewan Park. This is addressed primarily. The biggest problems of this have been addressed, and Julie doesn't have any more concerns with this. Restoration of Alderbrook stream bed. Clearly we need to pull this one back up as a priority, and they will scope it for us and get back to us. Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park green infrastructure. I think this one is funded. So I think we're all set with that, but I want to check with Jody on it.
So based on what Christy and Rebecca said, we were debating this one, whether it was parks or DEP, but it sounds like Parks is doing the watershed, and that old stream does fill up with stormwater. There's a lot of sedimentation in the pond. The thing that's funded is to keep the pond from overflowing into the parking lot, which then goes into the storm drain, into the sewer system, or I believe there's a connection into the river as well. So that's 3.5 million. That's the one that took 25 years of requests to get. but this one is for the rest of the pond. So I don't really know if that 3.5 million will cover dealing with the rest of the pond and the stormwater that's coming off into it.
So
from
do
the
we need
upper
to,
slope.
it sounds to me like we need to tighten this language so that Parks knows what we're talking about. Does that sound right?
I don't know, are they still on? Is Rebecca still on? Because it is a wetland.
Yeah,
I am. This is for Spite and Dipel.
Yeah.
Spite and Dipel Shorefront Park, so I'm the super steward there and
Yeah.
also have been putting in requests for it for 25 years. So the pond itself is highly silted in. The Phragmites are almost the entire surface of the pond now. A lot of it is from the Henry Hudson Park, the Henry Hudson Bridge construction of sedimenting in. I think they should do the restoration and pay for it like they paid for the tree. But we are having a lot more development upslope and the water is running faster and coming down the slope, and it does feed through there's an upper pond and a stream that's dry but has stormwater flow. So, and the pond gets really gross looking. So is there a way to restore the pond with the 3.5 million for the retaining wall, or do we need a separate request? There used to be salamanders and all muskrats and all kinds of wildlife in that pond. Egrets, we had great crowned night herons nesting there.
So Jody, can we just call it pond restoration? Like actually just, because I think it's
Well,
like
it's-
there's a lot of stuff in here.
I know it's the stuff that's coming off into the pond that the pond should act as it was a kettle pond to filter the water before it hit the river. So I just don't know how to phrase that to what a parks project would be that would provide the ecosystem functions, the stormwater management, all the things that Rebecca had on her slides. Like, how do we phrase it?
So I will look a little bit more if you guys can send me an email. Mike has my contact. I mean, I know we do have this project funded and I know we're intending to rebuild the retaining wall and are hoping to be able to, improve the condition of the pond, particularly, the lower one right along the road, and, manage Phragmites and be able to make it a little bit nicer. I want to manage expectations and that, I don't know how much we're going to be able to do that, but I can help connect you with the project manager to see kind of what the budget shortfall is looking at. I know they're really just starting the beginnings of design right now. And so I can't share very much. Unfortunately, it's really too early to say what they're going to have funding to be able to do and not, but we could certainly look into it and see what else we could potentially add.
Okay, so yeah, so that would be great because of course I have a long patient time frame and to be able to put this in and then it not be needed for me is the better thing than for us to be sitting here and saying like, oh my gosh, we need to put this in for fiscal year 26. There wasn't enough money. So any help you could give us in phrasing this in case you don't have enough money would be really great. Deb, I think the timeline's pretty short, right? You need this by next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we need to finalize it by next meeting, but if we need to just tweak some language or something, we can tweak some language.
Yeah, I think
we
the
put a
language
tentative. I'm sorry.
I think the language sounds fine. I think it's just confirming the amount. And it also might need some clarity to say that this is like an addition to the existing project, but again, we can help clarify that on our end.
Great, and I'm in the park on Tuesdays from 10 to 12 with other volunteers if you want to come visit and look at it.
All right, so it's getting late. David, did you have something you want to add, or I can want to try to get these last things just into a rough order, and then we'll be done with this.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that the
Right, we're gonna-
community board is able to submit about 25 or 30 capital budget priorities and about 25 or 30 expense budget priorities from the whole community board. And after 5, it doesn't count. So we have, looks like around 30 of our own. I just want to remind everybody.
Yep, no, totally. Thank you, David. Let's, it's a good segue into ranking. So the Fort Independence Park Dog Run, I just want to say that has been funded. They've added in the ramp already. That was the biggest part of that. And the drinking fountain is coming soon, so we can delete that. And then I want to just find a spot for the Wave Hill Swale. I feel like just based on the conversation we've had this evening that it should be kind of in our top 5. Also, I'll say that the restoration of the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, they have gotten funding for their roof. So the emergency stuff that they needed has been funded. So now they're, I think, primarily looking for funding for a kind of maintenance and point work and stuff like that. So I would like to kind of propose to put the Wave Hill Swale kind of in this like between 3 and 4. What do you think about that? Is that David, is your hand up?
Yeah, but I was actually though going to focus on Marble Hill Playground lighting because I think it will have a much larger impact on more people.
Okay. Ramdat, did you want to say anything about the swale?
I was actually gonna say exactly what David said. Thanks, David.
Okay, so where should the swale go? Below Marble Hill Playground. We can bring Marble Hill Playground lighting up too. This is just the first place of order, and we have to agree on the top 3.
I'm inclined, as much as I've been promoting the swale, I'm inclined to lower it a bit, and we use other methods to press Wave Hill to step up to the plate.
So below Old Fort 4, kind of in
Yeah,
here.
I think so.
Okay. So let's start up here. I still think the Bailey Playground should be number 1. Anybody opposed to that?
Absolutely. I think it's a disgrace that it's gone this
Still on
bad
this
this
list.
long.
Yeah. PEP. How do you guys feel about PEP being in the top 5?
No reservations.
No reservations? Bob Bender.
I have reservations.
I do too.
You know, it's we have to decide, is this the hill we want to die on? The Parks Department has been very clear that this is not going to happen. I'm inclined to, we've got elected officials who are prepared to, who have both advocated for this PEP command in Van Cortlandt Park. I think we all think it's a good idea. But, should this be the priority that it is, priority number 2? That's the question. And I'm more inclined to go with Kingsbridge Heights and the playground at Fort Independence and the playground at Old Fort 4. I think those projects serve more people more immediately.
I would also like to, we did have, I know it got pushed onto the Van Cortlandt Park priorities list, but we did have the Bailey Playground pedestrian plaza in our top 5 last year, which I would like to advocate for moving that up as well into a decent position.
Deb, on that one, I still think that's a DOT priority rather than, a TNT priority rather than a Parks priority. I mean, that was the feedback we got the first time, was that that there were different projects there. And I think that still is the case. This involves a DOT more than it involves the Parks Department.
I think that there's a safety part to it, but that also there's just simply that it's an entrance to a park that barely has a sidewalk, Like there's nothing, like there's just no pedestrian, like there's no plaza or benches or anything to make it look like an entrance. And I think that was the part that I was talking about with this budget priority, was really like just actually making it look like an entrance.
I totally agree with you, but I think in order to do that, you have to reconfigure the street, and that's the issue. You have to reconfigure the street outside the park. And that's why I think it really should not be a parks priority. I think it should be a TNT priority.
Well,
That's my point of view.
Yeah, we did it as a joint one last year, and DOT basically said it's on park property, so it's not us. And so it kind of got nowhere with the agency, at least. Like that's just not how they do. They do their stuff based on safety. They make their capital commitments based on criteria around safety.
Look, I think it's up to the committee to decide.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So PEP. So it sounds like I've got 2 people would like to move it down. So let's see. So it should go below restoration of Kingsbridge Heights Community Center. I heard that. Did I hear a thumbs up? The Parks District equipment, I feel like there was a lot of support in general for this. Just it's a garbage truck. Yes, we should go maybe below
Marble Hill.
Below Marble Hill.
Well, yeah. And maybe even yeah. Never mind. Yes.
So we got reconstruction of the Bailey Playground, Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, repointing, the garbage truck, Drone Park Reservoir safety lighting, Lower Bruss Park staircase, Marble Hill playground lighting. It's all our top vote getters, and then PEP. And then we've got equipment for the litter collection within Van Cortlandt Park. So that's Van Cortlandt Park's #1 priority. Where would we like to put that in ours, given that that's their #1? And in the top 5, like under the garbage truck, over the garbage truck.
Scroll down. I lost it. No, I mean, what
are we talking about?
Thing are we talking about?
Oh, sorry. We're talking about equipment for litter collection within Van Cortlandt Park, an additional mini packer vehicle to reach remote areas for litter collection.
And we had it together with the trucks, but they separated, right?
Yeah, they separated them because they would pick them off.
I would put it right behind Parks District
right?
equipment. Yeah.
Okay. And then we've got convert I don't know what's going on there. We've got convert Mosholu temporary. So this is the sewer connection. The Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, Park Mansion stairway restoration, Park Bailey pedestrian plaza. This one has always struggled to get into our top 5, let alone our top 10 sometimes. Where would we like to put it this year? I've sent a letter requesting an update from DEP on this work. I'm hoping to just kind of advocate for it.
I would agree on that. I sort of feel like, with all due respect, that it's their problem.
No,
Really,
I agree with David. I think it should not be a top priority for us. The Parks Department will survive if this doesn't happen for another few years. And compared to things like the playground lighting and the playground equipment, I think they're higher priorities than making this temporary site permanent in Van Cortlandt Park.
So maybe it's like we kind of deprioritized the crew cab pickup because we put other stuff up here. Does that make sense to wait? There's the garbage truck. Where did I have? Where'd my trash thing go?
Equipment for litter collection.
I think you cut it.
Oh, there it is. It's right here. Okay. I wasn't recognizing it. It didn't say truck, so I didn't
Okay.
see it. Okay, so this we should go maybe kind of in with here with the Parks District underneath or above the crew cab.
Stephanie, can you plug your ears?
Yes,
Let's-
look away, Stephanie.
Bob and I were both saying it's really not a priority for us. It's how they manage themselves, which is part of my concern about the PEP itself. It's how do they manage themselves? And I don't think we should get involved with that. As opposed to our needing a facility like the lighting, like the staircase, things like that.
Mhm.
Those two other issues of the Mashalou and the PEP people, that's really how they manage themselves.
So what about, so you'll see, I put our Hackett Park and Riverdale Playground above these two things for the minute. Because we've got the other stuff. What about Van Cortlandt Park Stadium?
Deb?
Yeah, Jody.
I know David says it at everything about after 5, it doesn't matter. And then I always say, well, it matters to have them on the list because at some point in the next decade or two, it'll move up.
Yeah.
But maybe it's better to just do, these are our top 10 and then write unranked, but keep them as priorities.
I think that, yeah, that's true. That makes sense. So we need to
Then you're
find,
not weighting each thing against the other. You're just saying like, okay, these are our top 10 and these we still care about, but can revisit if they don't get funded.
so then that's a good, I think that's a good segue to these two at the bottom that don't have any ranking. And then also if there's anything in here we want to bring into our top 10. So
And then I also want to make one more that I say every time for time immemorial. All of the top 10 are always playgrounds and paths and physical infrastructure, and natural areas take 25 years to get funded. So I would just like to propose that in the future, natural areas, even though they're not highly used at the same way that Van Cortlandt Park or the playgrounds are, that they, with climate change, they play an important function that if we don't protect them now, we're going to lose them. So that's my pitch. I know you hear it all the time, but I still have to say it. So thanks.
well, and with that in mind, Jody, do you have, if you had to pick between Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park Pond restoration and the upstream stormwater management of Alderbrook, like, is there, like, I would pick Alderbrook myself.
No, you should have let me answer. I would pick Alderbrook too, because there already was a lot of money invested in it. And to me, it's maintaining things we've already done. The pond hasn't been touched ever. So,
Right, and maybe we can get some work done on the other one, or as part of the other project too.
right, and I think if we can at least get these things funded when they're not monster problems, it's easier. So I would pick Alderbrook, and not just because Jane would yell at me if I didn't.
I mean, what do you think about putting it right under Marble Hill Playground Lighting Committee members? Here? Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I have a giant question about Alderbrook, which is the part of Alderbrook that we were talking about, the real problem with Alderbrook that we were talking about earlier is outside the park. It's upstream, and I don't know what the Parks Department is going to be able to do there. For example, Jane Sokolow was talking about the Windsor Apartments and the hard infrastructure for their parking area. Parks Department can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
So I'm not really clear that this is even a Parks Department priority.
Well, what they just
agree.
described to us, though, was that to keep it on the budget priorities and that they would go study it and then they would come back to us by our next meeting and let us know what they think they could do to address the stormwater management problems, because they can't do it on the private property, obviously, but
Right.
they've got to do something, and then maybe it's just a matter of approach, right? It's more rocks, it's increasing capacity, it's widening the channel. I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well, that's fine. I mean, keep it on there, but I don't think it should be a high priority. You know, that's how I see it.
okay. Ramdot or David or Rob?
Yeah, I don't think that's a high priority either.
So is it?
Rob said what I was gonna say.
So is it? So what about our we got Old Fort Park. We've got some playgrounds under here. We've got PEP. Is it go below that?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I would say.
I
Yes.
mean,
I agree.
I really think we shouldn't be dealing with anything below 10, because again.
Well, right. No, I know, David. Like that's what that's kind of what that's the subtext is. Is it gonna fall out of the top 10?
Okay, because even that's a stretch when we have 10 committees.
Yep. I understood.
Okay, enough said, sorry.
So we'll just to review our top 10, then we've got Bailey Playground, which I think we all feel pretty good about. Kingsbridge Heights Community Center, we definitely want to be in the top 10. Is there anything we want to be, is number 2 the right spot? Everyone's good with that? Okay.
No, I would say no, because we're not gonna get that budget. I assure you.
But
We are
this is
not.
this is for maintenance. So
You know,
this-
what you were talking about before about a letter and stuff like, I absolutely support that. But in terms of a budget item, we're not gonna get that money. The council member may find it, a senator may find it, but Parks isn't gonna give us that money. So I
But
certainly
that's-
wouldn't
Parks
put it
doesn't-
as number 2.
Parks doesn't have any money, though. The money that they have comes from that senator, comes from that council person.
That's
And
fair,
so-
that's fair.
Yeah, Ramdot.
No, I was gonna say, maybe we should leave it at number 2, because from, some of the other committees I'm on, like education, even though, the DOE didn't fund things, our council members pulled, those capital projects from our list.
Right.
So this may be like a way for, for it to be on somebody's radar, whether it be a senator or council member or our assembly member, one of the 3 legislative bodies or offices.
Right.
But how well does it serve the district?
What the Kingsbridge?
That's exactly the point I wanted to make. It's vital to
Yeah.
the district. I mean,
All right.
it's got programs from preschool to aging, maternal health care, pre-K. This is an extremely valuable institution in the community.
Yeah.
I think it's right where it should be.
Okay. I wasn't aware of the breadth of the, I mean, I'm supportive of them, but I wasn't quite aware of the breadth of their services.
Yeah, they do a lot.
Agreed. My
Yeah.
kids go there all the time.
Well, your kids
Go to their programming. I mean, my students.
I'm teasing.
And then we've got the large garbage truck and the mini packer here at 3 and 4, which I think are practical places for them to be in terms of the shopping list for the electeds. We might want to have something bigger as our number 3 than this would be the only thing I would suggest, like if maybe it's a pedestrian lighting or one of these here.
I would say the Marble Hill lighting or restoration of Lower Brust. I mean, with all due respect, Deb, I know you feel a lot for the Jerome Park lighting. It's a lovely idea without a question, but I don't see it being a higher priority than other stuff that, like the staircase, like the Marble Hill playground.
Well, I'll say too, like David, like as much, I think that the pedestrian lighting is important as a safety thing. That I was at Lower Brust a couple weeks ago, and it really is shocking how, I mean, it really does need to be repaired. And that it also seems very doable.
All right,
the
so let's move it up.
Lower Brust Park staircase. Rhonda,
Deb, I have a question.
Yeah.
I guess this is like from an equity lens. Have we funded anything in terms of like parks in Marble Hill in the last 3 years? or 5 years?
Yeah, I think so, because there's usually, you know, because they have their own, they have a different elected, and so usually they, the, Bob probably has a better institutional memory than I do about that there's been a couple of funded projects at the playground, I thought, though.
Well, the playground really is all there is in Marble Hill. That's part of the problem. That playground was renovated not too long ago. You know, time seems to keep getting more and more nebulous to me, but 5, 6, 7 years ago was when the last renovation took place. But it is heavily used, especially in the warm weather. And the lighting for Marble Hill, I think, really is an important priority.
Yeah, because the only other parks thing is Ewan Park, which is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, well, and Ewan Park has got the staircase, right? So they've got their.
Hey, Mike's got his hand up.
Mike's
Maybe
got his
he's
hand
got a surprise for us.
All right, Mike.
So, I just want to point out the playground at Marble Hill is very highly used, as well as Bob was saying. We do have some we're looking to get some mayoral money to reconstruct the synthetic turf field, which is in very, very bad shape. Yeah.
The synthetic turf at where in the park area where we want the lighting?
Well, we want the
I'm
lighting
not
in the
exactly
whole
sure what you
center, the whole center part of the park. All of the interior of the park has no
All
lighting.
on the western edge of Marble Hill, not in the ovals. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, we're talking about the playground, right?
Well, is the playground 230 and Kingsbridge?
It is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't understand what the oval. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the oval there.
Oh, the ovals are the greeneries between the buildings.
I don't think that's a Parks Department property.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think that might be the nature development, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry.
Right.
So, okay, well, so what I'm hearing is the lower Brush Park staircase, we'd like to bring it up, maybe bring it up kind of in here.
Yeah.
And then the Marble Hill playground lighting, we'd also like to bring up, maybe we bring that above the Brush Park staircase.
I think so.
I think so too, based on the number of people who use it.
Yeah.
Same.
And then let's see if there's any other. So as far as playgrounds and stuff goes, we've got the Bailey Playground in Kingsbridge. We've got Kingsbridge Heights. We've got Marble Hill. We've got Riverdale. Got Spuyten Duyvil. I mean, I guess if I had to pick between the Jerome Park Reservoir pedestrian safety lighting, which I like, but I feel like Old Fort 4 actually needs renovation. Like I would move that ahead of the pedestrian lighting myself in terms of need. And the play equipment at Fort Independence just because it's 20 years old.
I'm sorry, which pedestrian lighting? What are you talking about?
No, we were talking about the Jerome Park Reservoir lighting.
Sorry,
I
yes.
would myself put the Old Fort 4
I agree.
above that or replace it.
Agree.
Just because of maintenance.
Certainly above it. Which makes me wonder about, I thought we moved that down.
Well, what, the Alderbrook?
Yes.
Well, it's just been sliding down.
Well, Deb, what I would suggest is putting the play equipment at Fort Independence Playground ahead of Alderbrook.
With the number 13 there, yeah.
Or above the safety lighting, above the.
Above the safety lighting, yes.
We'll put all the playground stuff together.
Yeah, effectively.
I mean, we still have, Ramdat did suggest this too, the playground, the basketball courts in Riverdale. But so Bailey, Kingsbridge Heights, Marble Hill Playground, Lower Bruss Park Staircase, District Equipment, Van Cortlandt Equipment, Old Fort Ford Park, Fort Independence. It's a little cluster here. Maybe we put Alderbrook above the lighting? Or this, maybe we put the swale above the lighting?
The swale above the lighting, because the Alderbrook is, I think that's a bunch of phone calls, isn't it? Realistically?
Possibly. Yeah. Try to make those phone calls.
Right.
I mean, Hackett is on the list, but I think they're okay for the minute. There's a parks group, I think, that's organizing there, so we can look at that again next year.
Forgive me, which one is Hackett? I'm sorry.
Hackett is the one over by Riverdale, in kind of North Riverdale, like where Mosholu and Riverdale Avenue come together.
That's right. Riverdale, yeah, Riverdale Avenue, Mosholu to 54th Street. It's a tiny little park that really has a dog run and a couple of benches, and that's it.
Yeah, and to me, it seems like there's such an opportunity to just make it a nice dog run and a nice couple of benches.
Okay.
You know, but I think it can also be on hold for another year while the stewards get themselves organized and figure out what they want.
That sounds a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, the biggest problem with Hackett Park is that it's hard to get to because you've got to cross Riverdale Avenue or Mosholu. You know, and you have a much bigger park across the street, which is Vinmont Park. So it's sort of a forgotten park.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice if they made it easier to connect, go between the two parks.
Oh, is that big rock outcropping that's almost a triangle between Henry Hudson and Riverdale Avenue? At the very south end of that whole park area?
It's the part that's on Riverdale Avenue and on Mosholu, but directly south of Vinmont.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Okay.
It's
Thank
a
you.
rock. It's a rock outcropping, but that describes a lot of Riverdale. So
That's true.
all right, so Van Cortlandt Park Equipment, Old Fort Fort Independence, Wave Hill Swale, Safety Lighting, Alderbrook, PEP, Washington's Walk, Riverdale Playground.
How about Washington's Walk compared to Old Fort 4? Aren't they adjacent to each other?
They're adjacent to each other. Old Fort 4 is very heavily used.
Okay.
And I mean, Old Fort 4 is about to have a lot of construction because that's where the new bathroom is going.
Okay.
But it's a very, very heavily used playground that hasn't been reconstructed in 30 years probably.
Okay. Well, how about the Washington's Walk part? Whenever I see ADA, I think of fairness. Is it reasonably or at all accessible to
Mike was the
ADA?
one that added the ADA, that they were looking at that pathway to make it ADA accessible. I think it's kind of steep.
Right.
It's more of a like that. This is kind of a more affordable project that I think mostly is just about refreshing it. I would say that the Old Fort 4 one is that it's a heavily used playground and it's basically in the same condition as Bailey Playground. So I would put that one ahead of this one.
I agree. I wonder if including it might give parks an opportunity to drop down to Washington's Walk because this is cheaper and we can give them a win and ignore Old Fort 4. So
I mean, we could combine them, I suppose. I mean, within the parks world, they are Old Fort 4 is technically part of Washington's Walk.
That works for me.
I don't know. I have reservations about that. They are, you're right, Deb, that technically speaking, the Parks Department considers Old Fort 4 to be part of Washington's Walk. But everybody in the community thinks of them as separate entities.
Okay.
And the thing that really needs to work is the playground in Old Fort Ford Park.
Yeah,
So, I think we muddy the waters if we put them together.
okay, I think that sounds like wise counsel to me. So is this our order for now? We've got this one. Is there anything anybody wants to advocate for getting added up?
I'd like to keep the engineering study in play.
Okay.
Not a top priority, but
Where would you think of
10th, 11th, 12th. I mean,
I was wondering if it actually qualifies as capital since it does not last 5 years.
again, it's $35,000. That's the rule. It's stupid. No accountant would ever follow that rule, but those are the rules.
What about kind of in here with I don't want to send Alderbrook too far down, but
Well, again, I don't think Parks is going to do anything for an Alderbrook project other than maybe investigating, the responsibility of Windsor Oaks.
well, but they're not, I think that there's all kinds of stuff they can do in the park itself, as far as adding rocks or outcroppings or planting plants.
Oh, I'm sorry. I took upstream to mean basically uphill from Socolow.
I think that what they mean by upstream management is really managing the flow of water coming down
Anywhere
in the park.
east of,
It's
Palisade
the
Avenue.
only place where they can control it, which is in the park.
Okay, my mistake.
But is it kind of in here for Van Cortlandt Stadium? I mean, what do people think about moving it up?
Deb, I don't think there's going to be an engineering study until the Parks Department decides that it's actually going to do some reconstruction of the stadium. They're not going to do an engineering study just to do one. They'll do that only if they've already made a decision that they're leaning towards reconstructing the stadium. And I mean, Stephanie can speak to this better than anybody else, but I don't think the Parks Department is anywhere near that kind of decision.
Mike has raised his hand. Mike, what would you like to add?
Oh, okay.
Hi, the point of the CPSD study, the study would be to determine what would the uses be for the stadium. So a few years back, I believe in 2007, only be actually fronted and paid for the funding of the Orchard Beach pavilion or the Orchard Beach bathhouse master plan study. And that's what allowed all the scope developments to determine how much it'll cost and what can happen at Orchard Beach. So the goal of this, the goal of a study for the stadium would really be to answer those questions for us.
And at that point is when we start trying to rally ourselves as well as our electeds.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, because it would also more times than not, these studies actually come with a dollar amount attached to it, based on the use that the study determines would be best for the space.
So based on that and how central Van Cortlandt Park Stadium is, I feel like it should go up a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe above the swale.
Okay.
It's the name of my new novel, Above the Swale. Where was it?
Think of all these projects we can fund now with the absence of the pedestrian bridge.
Project singular.
All right, so this is kind of our list. So right now, this is where it starts at 2. So this is the cutoff for the top 10 right now.
Well, that would be 2 to. Oh, I'm sorry, never mind.
Top 10 would be 2 to 11.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant that above where my line is. These are the top 10.
Reconstruction and bailing.
I feel like honestly, the Alderbrook stream bed thing should be like, I would swap the swale and the stream bed. We get the Alderbrook stream bed in the top 10, at least until they can tell us what it involves, like if we can maybe do it without this.
As long as Michael push the swale in the background,
Mm-hmm.
right, Mike?
I'm gonna bring it up to the team that handles this agreement. That's about all I can do right now.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
And Deb, for future, you want to insert that just says unranked so that we don't think that the rest of it, next time we come back next year.
Yeah. No. Yep. So these would be our top 10.
Yeah.
Do we feel good about it? We exhausted? All right.
No, actually, that's invigorated because this was productive, I thought.
Yeah, no, I think it was really productive. I'll send the list around so we can kind of take a look on it and sleep on it. And I think with a little bit of patience from our budget chair, I think we meet like the day after our budget stuff is due. But if we can get a little bit of forbearance, we can have it over to him as soon as we just have one last look at it. If
We'll
that's
talk.
Okay. We'll give you a rough draft.
Yeah, that's fine. Deb, you know how this works. It'll be fine.
I
But
wanted
don't we
to
have to do expense still?
Oh yeah, right. Oh, shoot.
Not to burst your bubble.
I know, it's so close. Right. Share screen. So expense, we've got our old standby prep personnel. We've got crushed stone for maintenance. To enable repairs of tracks and walkways within District 8. We've got the Bruckner box. Jody, do you still need that, or have we gotten that fixed?
I'm making zero progress, so yes. Between you and Camellia, there is the request to check the hydrants to see if it's a problem with the other line, but it's still.
We're working on it.
Yeah,
But the problem is
Joe
it-
still thinks they have to tear the street. Joe still thinks Parks has to tear the street up because DEP is saying it's Parks' connection to the main,
Right.
The
even
problem
though
is
they don't know.
right. It's still a definite maybe. I'm not sure we can make a request out of it.
Right.
Well, it is a request. It's going to cost money. It's going to cost money.
But it
to
may
fix.
not be Parks money. It may be just a DEP fix their mistake.
Right, but my point again is that having these things in
Right,
there
should be on- it
is
should be on the
better
list,
than
yeah.
not. It's better than being like, oh, we should have put that in. It is a Parks problem.
I'd like to move, there's two really practical things on this list, which is replacing the existing gator and the crushed stone. That I would like to put those towards the top. Is there anybody who objects to number 1 and 2? And I forgot to give the expense ones to Stephanie. I don't know if Stephanie's still on the call.
Yep.
I'm still here. Who's the crushed stone for?
Joe.
Ah.
In case, why do you want to get in on the crushed stone?
Yeah, I'd like to get in on that.
So 2 piles of crushed stone for me.
Is this stuff all stored up at the across from the stables?
No,
Yes.
that's assault, you mean?
Well, I know that, but Stephanie, is that the kind of thing that we would store at that state DOT?
No,
facility
not
in Stables?
not at the DOT location. We would either store it closer to the stables, or we would store it. There's also a horticulture yard behind the parade ground.
Okay.
All right, I'm adding Van Cortlandt Park here under the crushed stone. Anything else? So this seems to be probably a pretty decent order. Got the Gator, crushed
just-
stone, PEP.
Just one thing, and
Yeah.
Mike, you might be able to answer this. We were talking last year about the cobblestones that were being removed from, was it from Old Fort 4?
Strong Street Playground.
Strong Street, excuse me, thank you. What's happening to them? Because like the crushed stone, I'd like to make sure we don't lose them. Which I don't think is a huge lift, no pun intended, but Mike, do you know anything about that?
I'm sure we can salvage some of them.
Right.
We have in the past. I know that we've salvaged a lot of those Belgian blocks, and we've just been trying to find projects to use them. So they just kind of like stack up and take up space. So I know that others are really hesitant to just salvage them because there's not much really there's not a lot of like applications for us to reinstall them somewhere. But I let me double check with our maintenance team on this.
Okay.
The pile may be depleting, so maybe it is time to save some of them again.
Maybe,
I have an application for you.
yeah, but Mike, maybe you can store them on Palisade Avenue across from the Half Moon Overlook.
No,
So-
you can store them behind my shed at Henry Hudson Park because we would love to use them to. I'm not adding these for this year. I have a new list for fiscal year 26 already. We
For
wanna
expenses?
we
For
want
expenses, Jody?
for both capital and expenses. So I'm not.
Well,
I don't want to
for
debate them.
26, it's after 10 o'clock, so we
Yeah,
can do
I don't
it,
wanna
we can do
debate
it in
them.
April or we can do it in
But
September.
Mike, we could use some to do edging and beds because we have cobblestone edging in the park.
So is this good for expense?
I think
Any
so.
changes, any suggestions? Okay, great. All right, excellent thing. So old business, PEP. I went to the Community Board 7 Parks Committee and they passed a resolution supporting our PEP resolution. Community Board 12 Parks Committee has also shown interest in it. They just haven't voted on any support yet. I followed up on the fence adjacent to Bruss Park. That came up at our last meeting. The stewards of Bruss Park were asking for assistance with the leaning fence that was adjacent to Upper Bruss Park. We have confirmed that belongs to the Parks Department, and they're looking at solutions for straightening it or removing it and putting in boulders or something like that. They're working with the stewards on that. Henry Hudson Park hydrants, Jody, thank you, Jody, for helping us identify exactly which hydrants they are. And so DEP Luke has been working with DEP to follow up on that. We sent a letter to DEP requesting an update on the parks request for a sewer connection for the structure they built as a temporary Mashtu Golf House. We look forward to hearing from them on the project. 235th Street Pump Station. David, you brought this one up at the last meeting. We reached out to DEP and they gave us their update today. The DEP and their contractor will restore the site at completion. A landscaping plan was prepared by a landscape architect and was included in the bid documents. The contractor has hired a subcontractor who will furnish and install the new plantings. In addition, DEP has provided funding to New York City Parks to plant $300,000 in new trees in the area. And the details of the landscaping are in a drawing that the office has. I have not seen it yet. This all came today. Any area impacted by the construction will be restored to as new condition. The asphalt path along Palisade Avenue will be replaced from the northern edge of the pump station all the way to 232nd Street. And the work is scheduled to be complete in mid-2024. That is it for my old business. Anybody else have any old business?
I just want to see if Mike had any further conversations with the pump station people on this, particularly the plan you were just talking about. Has he seen it? Have any of the parks people seen the restoration plan. And also, Mike, do you have anything about, the severe deterioration underneath the fence to Riverdale Park along that walkway?
Sorry, Dave, I don't have an update on that yet. We
Okay.
I did reach out to the team that's working on it. It kind of just a couple other things got in the way with the same team. But I will follow up with them again. But I did reach out and I'll follow up again.
Okay, so next month, you think?
Yeah, definitely by next month. I may
Okay.
not be at the meeting, but I'll definitely let you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, just pass it
Sounds
on.
good.
Mike. Pass it on.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Any new business?
I have something. Stewards of Ewan Park are asking about more chips. Wood chips that they dumped last year are gone and they need them for the dog park again. So Julie asked me to ask that out loud at a meeting.
Yeah, I think is Carl Vetter still on the call?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Hey, Carl. Julie's asking for more wood chips in Ewan Park.
Oh, I can work on wood chips. That's no problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carl can make it happen. Thank you, Carl.
Welcome.
Jody, you got your hand up.
New business.
Your business.
All of the local stewards groups will be out this weekend. Jerome Park Friends and Neighbors, Stewards of Ewan Park, Stewards of Henry Hudson Park, and Stewards of Russ Park all have events. I will be emailing a list of them, so please go out and help us in the parks, or at least visit and say hi and thank you. That would be really great. And then CUNY TV videoed a piece that they're doing on Spite and Dival, and they did a piece on Forever Wild and Shorefront Park. So I will let you know when that comes out. So good things are happening. Everybody's out. Spring is here. Save the date for the City Nature Fest. Carl, do you want to talk about it?
You wanna talk
Since
about
you've
it,
been
Carl?
doing a lot of the planning.
Oh, yes. So we have fun little city nature festivals planned at Henry Hudson on the 29th of April and at Ewan Park on the 30th. We have urban park rangers. We have compost information workshops. We have chalk artists. We have some light giveaways. We'll have nature walks, binoculars for people to use, IMPs happening. So pretty much the full robustness of biodiversity importance and education and all that fun jazz. Really just to try and get some, observations for the City Nature Challenge, which is what I call the world's largest science project. Everyone goes out with their phones, takes pictures of plants and insects. You don't even have to know what they are, just take the pictures, and then someone else will come along and help idea it, and then we all can kind of get a sense of what's in your parks. And kind of gives us a better, sense of like, oh, look at what I can find here, which kind of makes parks more exciting. And so that's kind of the gist of it. If anyone has more questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to share more details, at a more daylight hour.
Is IMP, it's my park day, and is
Oh, yes. Sorry
and
about that.
is it that day, that
Oh,
April day?
yes. It'll be it's my park project as part of the City Nature Festival. So depending on what your interest is, you can gravitate towards more drop-ins or more, kind of more scheduled programming. It's still in the planning, but pretty much if you come out, there's something for everyone.
I would encourage both you and Jody to send your information on your both events, Saturdays and the Nature Fest, to the board office to ask them to post it on our website. Maybe
I
in
will
our
send all that
Yeah,
information out tomorrow.
Pablo and Luke have been really great at posting all the flyers that I send. So
Oh, good.
Yeah, so that's
Because I wasn't
been
aware.
great.
Good,
And then the other thing is that thanks to Carl and funding from Council Member Dinowitz, the stewards will be getting some tools that we have been needing for weeding. So that's very exciting. And Carl, I may get fold scopes for us to take pictures of microorganisms for the City Nature Challenge. So come to April 2nd at the Riverdale Sunday Market pop-up on Johnson Avenue. I will be tabling with information about the event from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. this Sunday, and you can ask me a million questions. That's it,
Excellent.
Deb, I'm done.
Excellent. And Carl, what was the name of that app that people can install if they on their phones if they would like to do some identification in parks?
Oh, of course, it's the iNaturalist. It's a fantastic app. And I will send you a fun little Google folder tomorrow that has some flyers and some one pagers and some fun bits.
Excellent. And then also I wanted to just under new business, thank you, Carl, and thank you, Jody, for all that. I wanted to remind everybody on the committee, think about folks for the Irving Latimer Community Service Award. If there's volunteers who are working in the parks who you would like to nominate, just send me their names and we can add that to the agenda. We can discuss if there's some people we'd like to discuss at the April meeting. And then our May meeting will be on the Putnam Greenway, Tibbetts Greenway. Any other new business? All right, well, I want to thank all of you for your stamina. We got a ton of stuff done. And so hopefully you feel that sense of accomplishment. And the next meeting will be much lighter, I promise. I'd like to, I have a motion to adjourn the meeting this evening. Ramda, come on.
Motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. I want to give also a big shout out to Stephanie and Mike for staying to the full end. Thank you so much. You are dedicated civil servants.
And
We
Carl,
appreciate
and
you.
Carl.
And Carl. Although I think Carl might have fallen asleep. I don't know.
No, I'm here. I'm just eating. I'm sorry. We had an all-day training, and so I was like, I'm inhaling chicken bits. So
Oh.
it was up.
Well, thank you too. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Be safe.
Good
Bye,
night,
everybody.
everybody.